The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Miniature Wargames with Battle Games magazine, and by the generous donations of you, the listener. Many thanks to Martin Armstrong, David Yechausen, Glenn Oberhauser, Marcus Wheeler, Eric Shirk, Andrew Gilmartin, Marcus Bennett, Robert Ruffner, and Alex McIntosh. Guys, thank you so much for your donations. They help make this show possible. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 165. Interview with Collins Epic Wargames about the Polyversal Kickstarter. And a roundtable discussion about the wargaming industry. With hosts Neil Shuck, Mike Hobbs and Mike Whitaker, and guest Byron Collins. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. I'm Neil Shuck, and on this show I am once again joined by Mike Hobbs.
Hello.
Hello, and Mike Whitaker.
Hello.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Very well.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
He's doing better than me, obviously.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, I can see.
Ha ha.
So, still no painting then, Mike?
Nope, but I have been wargaming.
That's something at least. So, what have we got in store for you on today's show? Well, all sorts of different things, actually. So, we're continuing with our new format, since the feedback we've had so far is that people seem to like it. And it does help with breaking things up, especially when we've had what appears to be a couple of longer shows. So, thank you very much for your feedback. It's very much appreciated. And thank you especially to everybody who replied to the poll that I put up on the blog the other week. Some really interesting comments, really interesting feedback on that. Thank you. Regarding, how long people want their show podcast to be.
Very interesting that the top two votes were for don't care, make it as long as you need to, and the shortest option.
Well, shortest but one.
Shortest but one. So for the folks who voted for the shortest but one, we'll try and make a natural break about halfway through. Okay.
Indeed. Yeah, as you said, and this is something that we've had conversations on a lot in the background. We've been ending up in a situation where we have so much that we want to talk about, and so many people that we want to speak to. It's very difficult squeezing it into that 2 to 2.5 hour show slot, especially if we want to talk. We want to try and remain a little bit more relevant and talk about some of the stuff that's going on in the hobby every couple of weeks. Quartz don't fit into point pods, and especially with the fact that we tend to be a little bit verbose, wordy. Waffling. Yes,
and the gentle listeners should probably appreciate that given 2 hours of audio, it takes at least twice that long to edit it, if not more.
Yes. So we are actually making.
Why I got promoted.
Yes. It's a promotion. Yes.
Well done, Mike.
Yes, indeed. So Mike is helping out with and co-editing this particular podcast with me. So
if it's dreadful, you can get me fired.
Yes. So if anything goes wrong, it's all Mike's fault. Okay. Just between you and me. Don't tell Mike.
I heard that.
Rats.
Shh. Be very, very quiet.
I won't de-wabbit. No, stop it.
Sigh, more editing work.
So, what have we got in store for you on today's show? Well,
Tell us about it, Neil.
I don't know, Neil. What have we got in store for you on today's show?
good grief, both. I thought you'd never ask. Okay, so we're going to be catching up with some hobby news, and hopefully be a lot shorter than last time. We're obviously going to be catching up with what we've been doing in the hobby. For the two main bits of the show itself, the kind of our two feature bits. First off, we have an interview with Byron Collins of Collins Epic Wargames. This is the company that is running the Polyversal Kickstarter, which is the game that we spoke to Ken Whitehurst about back in episode 124. Okay, and the one that we've been tweeting and blogging about a little bit. 6mm sci-fi game. So we've got actually, it's a really good and really interesting interview with Byron, because we talk about so much more than just that. It's a really good interview. Even if we say so ourselves, that's worth a listen. Following on from that, we've got the first of what we hope will become a regular feature, and something that we're hoping we might even get some of you involved in. This is something we're calling our round table. Okay, so think back to the sort of thing we did in episode 150. Or, well, it may be that, or it may be, we'll just take a subject and we'll talk around it. In this particular episode, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a section of the questions that you asked us in episode 150, which we never got to. And this is all to do with our thoughts and opinions on the industry, and where we thought it was going, and some of the things that were good, some of the things that were not so good. And so we're going to be discussing that, and that is effectively going to be our mailbag as well for this particular show, because obviously we're dealing with an awful lot of your questions in that particular segment. However, in future, what we're also hoping to do with that particular segment is to take a subject and then to have a discussion about it. And so that's the idea of this new roundtable segment, and that's something that's going to be coming around every 2 or 3 months. So that's what we've got in store. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be catching up with what we've been doing in the hobby.
I must get through to Sergeant Watson's position. Jenkins, cover me!
Sir!
Whoa. Sergeant Watson, bring your men in! Withdraw!
It's all right, sir. We're enjoying ourselves.
What?
Yes, sir. It's these here chain of command rules, sir. We're having great fun.
Chain of command?
That's right, sir. It's a challenging but fun blend of command and control. It gives me the freedom I want to fight the way I want to. Never had so much fun, sir.
And we've cooked you some sausages.
Can't be helped, sir. Me and the lads are staying put.
Chain of command, World War II, platoon level rules from two fat laddies. They really put you in control. And they're even better than sausages.
What have we been playing? What have we been buying? We might even have painted something. The Meeples and Miniatures crew reveal all. So what have we been doing? I think it's Mr. Whitaker's turn to start this one, isn't it?
Apparently. What have I been doing? No painting, as previously mentioned, but then I haven't really had much time for that lately. What have we done? We had a very nice game of Sails of Glory down the club with our super new ocean tables, courtesy of Greg from the club. I will pop a picture up somewhere for folks to see because they're really very nice. There's basically it's nice deep ocean blue and then layers of PVA for texture and several layers of gloss varnish, and they look absolutely fantastic.
Cool.
And on top of that, we had a game of Chain of Command. I wheeled out the old trusty Home Guard for another sterling defence of some poor little English village against Gary's early war Germans. And man, that man has got so paranoid about driving past milk churns now. But I think that one was probably, to be fair, a victory for the Germans. Although he did lose 2 bits of close combat he had no business losing due to some rather extraordinary dice rolling. That was good fun, actually. I had forgotten how much fun Chain of Command is because it's the first time I've actually played it since quite a way before Christmas. What else has happened? We've been playtesting our game for Hammerhead down the club. It involves lots of aquarium plants and divers on telescopic aerials.
Ooh.
Hopefully that'll get to Salute, but we're on the waiting list, and the waiting list is quite big, so who knows?
Right.
But that's pretty much been me in the hobby. I haven't pledged anything, and I haven't bought anything.
That's quite impressive.
Don't be snarky.
Well, for being snarky, I think I'll go next as punishment. Well, okay, so what have I been doing?
You've been waiting for Dave to paint a glider.
Perhaps he's doing it on purpose to give me a taste of my own medicine. with how long he's had to paint, he's had to wait for me to paint some models. But yes, we still haven't started our Chain of Command campaign because I'm still waiting for Dave to paint his bloody glider, which he bought at Derby, I should point out, which is October. And we did, and I did say, well, okay, well, we need that for our first scenario, because the first scenario is Pegasus Bridge, and it starts with the glider lands.
So, October, November, December, January, February. You are complaining because he's only taken 5 months to paint a glider.
I want to start. I've got figures painted.
Just checking.
Neil, do you want to lend my D-Day ones for He Was a Normandy? Because, it's got the bridge board, and it's got all the canal boards, and it's got the glider boards as well. You just lay it all out and play on top of that. It'd look nice. It'd be flat.
Shall we step away from that one? Anyway.
I'm just offering.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate yes, I appreciate that. No, it has to be said, Dave is getting a little bit distracted with doing things like setting up his own business. And doing
excuse.
I know, it's just terrible, isn't it? I don't know. Go and call it. Setting up a new business. Can't afford the time to paint a glider. I just don't know what the world's coming to. Anyway, so in the light of the fact he's not painted a glider, the one thing we have done is actually we've been playing board games, and one specific board game, which is actually Twilight Struggle. Which is quite nice because I've been waiting to play Twilight Struggle for ages, and because I think I only got to play it once or twice, but quite a while ago. So I've actually quite enjoyed it because it's a great game. It takes a while to play, but it's a great game. It really is good. So all my gaming recently, up until this coming weekend, has been board gaming. However, this coming weekend, I'm going to the Strongest World Championships.
Oh, you're going to that one, you?
I'm going to that. Just yes, which is happening just south of Oxford, and so I'll report back on the next show. But suffice it to say, I'm borrowing an army, I'm borrowing terrain, I've got everything else. I'm providing the cards and all the counters, but Mr. Miller that is Simon Miller, is very kindly lending me one of his Roman armies to go down and play. So I'm really looking forward to that. And because it's been, last time I played To the Strongest was before Christmas, I'm probably going to get soundly thrashed all day, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, say hello to my mate Mark, who's there.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yes, we'll do. Yes, I shall. Yes, I shall find it out and say hello. Other than that, I've been painting because I didn't actually other than editing 2 massive podcasts, because Mr. Whitaker has been taking over some of the editing. It actually meant that one day last weekend I actually had some time to do some painting. So I've started my next batch of models for some of the next scenarios. So I've got about half a dozen models and about a dozen infantry on the painting table, which I'm about halfway through. And if you follow the blog on Twitter feed, you will see them as they go together. Half-track AA guns and stuff like that. Yeah, some interesting models. I hate Flames of War anti-aircraft guns. They are so fiddly to put together. Especially like me if you've got fat fingers. Anyway.
Not of course helped by the fact that there are no instructions on the pack.
Oh no, no instructions on the pack, and actually, I've only found one with instructions on it on their website, which is the Flak 43. The half tracks, basically, they got loads of pictures, so you basically have to go through all the pictures and work out where everything goes. And especially when you got like the quad AA gun, the quad 20mm, comes in about 8 or 9 pieces, and it's frustrating. Never mind. Have I bought anything? The only thing I bought is the 2 supply wagons that I ordered from QOF finally turned up. It took ages to come from them. It's weird. Everything else I've ordered from most people comes in a couple of days. That took almost, from QOF, it took almost 2 weeks. But they look quite interesting. I think we previously had a conversation about, why don't more people produce horse-drawn stuff? To which I think your answer, Hobbsy, was the fact, they just aren't cool. But they finally turned up and they're looking quite nice. So I'm looking forward to putting them together at some point. But other than that, I bought a new set of rules, which we'll cover in the hobby news. But Advanced Song of Blades and Heroes. So bought a copy of that. That's about it.
Cool. Is it me then?
It is you.
Right. There's one I forgot from the last news we did. So not news. The last what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Is I had a big game of Iron Cross in the middle of January with Stu and Darryl and what is it? There was about 6 of us playing.
Okay.
Big North African game on 12x6 table.
Oh yeah, you were tweeting some of that, weren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I got thrashed. Yeah, it was fun. What a good little game! I tell you what, for doing big multiplayer games, it's perfect. It's really intense. You can't relax for a second. What I notice is when you're playing a multiplayer, you don't sort of say, well, this is my little section, I'm just going to look after that, and this is your little section. You work as a team. Just the way that the turn works with the chits and stuff, it's great. It's really good little, multiplayer game.
Yeah. Of course, I suppose it also helps with the fact that that because you can hit anything on the board, as long as you can see it. Yeah. It doesn't preclude you only fighting the person immediately opposite you, does it?
Yeah, there was none of that. It was literally 3 on 3.
That moment when you realise that the panther at the other end of the table is presenting its flank to you.
Oh yeah, when you sort of duck down or something, you sort of nudges you in the ribs, go, got a spare chit. We could have a go at that, and yeah, great fun. So I loved that. I had a game of Chain of Command. I showed one of the bolt action players down the club. He's actually the guy who runs the Welsh bolt action tournament.
Oh right, okay.
And he's been badgering me to play it for ages, so I took down. I'm at the game. I lost that one as well. But that was because I was obviously...
Let me get this straight. The only person who hasn't played Chain of Command this time round is the person who played Nothing Ends All last year.
I think you're right there, Mike.
Correct.
I think I am.
Yes.
Come on, Dave. Get that glider painted, for goodness sake.
Yeah, so yeah, Chain of Command. In fact, I've had 2 games of Chain of Command this year, which is great. Really enjoying it again. And what's even more fun is he played it, loved it, wants to do more. And he said, it's completely different to bolt action. It's more tactical. He said, and it's great because when he's got more time, he can play Chain of Command. And when he hasn't got much time, he can just throw out a quick game of a bolt action.
We have quite a few folks down the club who play both for exactly the same reasons.
Mm. And
if they want a serious tactical bruise your brains, think hard, get it realistic game. They'll play Chain of Command. If they want to get a whole load of toys on the table and blow the shit out of each other and play something that looks like World War II, they'll play Bolt Action.
Yeah. So that's really good. Painting stuff. I've been carrying on with my Stormtroopers for Star Wars. So I painted another load of those and some more Planetfall stuff.
Yes, your Planetfall aerial helixes look very nice.
They're very pretty. Nice, yeah. So they're done. What have I bought? Well, we had the Crusade event in Penarth, which is our sort of local Wargames event.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down there because I wanted to meet up with Rich Clark, which I did. And then I walked past Early War Miniatures, and I just popped in to have a chat with them, and I may have bought a few bits.
Yes, because you've been talking about doing Early War in 20mm, haven't you?
Yeah, so I've got stuff for that now. So I bought some Panzer IIs and...
The clue's in the name, guys.
Yeah. Sorry. Some more stuff for that.
More stuff for that, yeah. Which was nice. And then I went out for curry with Rich and all the guys from the Tapswell Club. And I didn't get massively drunk and insult anyone. Which was a first.
Who are you and what have you done with Hobbsy?
Because they just break a habit. Yes.
Mainly because the wife was picking me up. So I did that. So that was a really good day. I've resurrected my 1812, my War of 1812 project. And this was just from sitting in the pub with Rich, talking about Sharp Practice 2. So I have bought a few sample packs of Knuckle Duster, Matchlock, and Brigade Games figures.
I was just kind of go, okay, this is what I've currently got. What do I need to finish it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Because okay.
I've got some Knuckle Duster anyway, so I need to add a few more to them to make up proper units. And I wanted to have a look at Matchlock, and Brigade Games look very sweet. So I've ordered some of those, just to have a look at them. And obviously I need some Sabo bases, so I got some Sabo bases for more bases. And then I had a look at the Perry miniatures that I had in my cupboard, so I've made up some Canadian militia from those.
Oh, is that from their AWI range?
No, from the British Napoleonics.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, the militia in Upper Canada basically wore British uniforms, although they were green jackets. Some of them had shakos, some, they didn't have sort of the plates on them or some plumes, so you just cutting those down. And I did some conversions from the 95th Rifles to the basically I converted some of the Perry's plastic riflemen, gave them muskets, and they're going to form one of the Canadian Light Troops. So I got 6 of those. So yeah, all good stuff.
Cool.
That's me done.
Good stuff. Well,
have you noticed, Neil, how Hobbsy always takes about twice as long as we do?
Well, that's because he's a busy boy.
We should clearly give him some editing work to do.
Like I say, Mike's been playing games and painting and buying stuff, and we've been sat in front of a computer screen staring at Audacity.
I know.
Hobby time has to go somewhere.
Yeah, I now know what you saying looks like on an Audacity display without having to listen to it.
Oh, cool. I might just drop a few more in just to really upset you.
And on that note, I think we shall wrap this section up, and we'll take another break, and when we come back, we'll be discussing the hobby news. Announcements, new releases, Kickstarters. What's caught our eye? It's time to catch up with the Meeples and Miniatures hobby news. So, welcome to the hobby news. Lots of bits and pieces to talk to, but we're hoping to cover them quicker than we did last time. We'll give it a go.
Yeah.
So, first off, I think I'll start this one. As I mentioned in my what I've been up to, one of the things I bought, or probably the only thing I bought this past couple of weeks, has been a new version of Advanced Songs of Blades and Heroes from Ganesha Games. Now, for many years, it's certainly before Open Combat and things like Otherworld and stuff were around. For me, if I wanted to play a small fantasy warband game, there was one set of go-to rules, which was Song of Blades and Heroes. Now, over the space of a number of years, that came into like 4 different volumes and lots of different bits and pieces. So what Andrea at Ganesha Games has done, he did a Kickstarter to produce a new version with a brand new background, bringing all the rules together into a single volume, and then also producing some different campaign book backgrounds for it. So that's what Advanced Songs of Blades and Heroes is. So basically, it's a small warband, potentially RPG light, but a really nice game engine. Very simple, 2 stats to worry about, and new rules, new artwork, really, really good. It's out in PDF, and it's very reasonable. I think it's about $12, something like that. So very well worth a look.
Moving on. From the small boys to the very big boys. Games Workshop.
Ooh.
Who, being a very big boy, have been to the Nuremberg Toy Fair, where they have been showing off a range of Warhammer 40k build and paint kits, which,
Right, okay.
as far as I can see, look like they're going to be this generation's FX kits. They're basically sprues with paints, figures, Space Marine attack bike, Orc Ard boys, that kind of thing. The interesting thing is they appear to be targeting the big box toy and retail stores.
Oh, right. So is this is this the sort of thing that, you know, when you back in the day you used to buy a Spitfire,
Yeah,
and it used to come with like 4 paints and a paintbrush.
you still can actually, but yes,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're doing that. It's a ballsy move again.
it is. And also, apparently, they might be bringing back good old Blood Bowl.
Well, they are, because they announce a while ago that basically they've resurrected their specialist games division.
But they actually had some figures at the Nuremberg Toy Fair.
Yes, I think Blood Bowl is probably the first thing they're doing, because of all their specialist games, I think Blood Bowl is still the most popular.
Hell, even I've played Blood Bowl.
Yeah, I played Blood Bowl up until Blood Bowl came out.
It actually it somehow grafted itself into my D&D campaign back in the 90s. I had a whole bunch of characters who actually had Blood Bowl stats in addition to their other stats.
Okay.
But yeah, there you go. Games Workshop.
That'd be interesting.
Let's see how that goes.
Yeah. And if you swap the letters from GW around, you get WG, which goes down to Warlord Games. And they just announced their Project Z. So it's a zombie. But they're using the stuff from Wargames Factory, aren't they?
Well, when you've just bought probably one of the best ranges of zombies and survivors, they are very, very nice models, particularly the survivors.
I must admit, I don't know if there's. I thought the zombies were a bit small.
Maybe.
But
you shrink when you rot, you know?
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Yes, but yeah, certainly I've heard very good things about their survivors. And yes, as you say,
they're lovely models, and you've got to do something with them.
Not quite. So why not produce a zombie game? Because we all need another one of those, don't we? Yeah. Previewing at Salute, apparently. So, I mean, well, sorry, they're putting something together for Salute. Whether or not it's actually going to be a full game, or whether they'll just do a preview, they basically haven't said an awful lot about it, other than the fact that they're doing it. But, as you say, zombie game. Just when you thought you got over the Mantic Kickstarter.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the shopping mall.
Yeah.
Boom, and indeed, Tish.
What else we got?
What else we got?
Talking of zombie games, Cerisa have produced a crypt and graveyard.
Oh, what, in MDF?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Which, looks quite nice. Although I do prefer the Anstey one.
Oh, the Anstey one's gorgeous.
I actually really like the Sarissa one. The railings around it are almost a lovely piece for swiping in their own right.
Yeah, it is nice. The Angsty Graveyard set is really, really nice. Yes.
Yeah, the Sarissa. There's not a lot wrong with the Sarissa one.
No, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it.
The crypt is lovely, and the iron fences with stone posts round it are so nickable for other things.
Yeah, not quite. Yeah, yeah. As you say, eminently nickable and usable, especially if you happen to be doing I don't know, Victorian gaming or something,
or even World War II England for home card games, say.
Oh, yes, of course.
I could steal those quite shamelessly.
Yeah. If only you didn't have one already.
I don't yet.
Ah, well, there we go.
We have a massive graveyard, but we don't actually have a proper crypt.
Oh, no. Right. There you go.
Right, okay, just a quick one. Peter Pig have released a new edition of their Regiment of Footballs. These are English Civil War. In their range of games that are similar to things like square bashing and stuff, so so they're like gridded war games. Okay, if only it was easier to purchase a copy of a PDF of this. It's quite easy to purchase a hard copy because you just go straight in and order it, but well, I suppose in some ways their ordering system on PDF gets around all these EU rules on VAT for PDF, because it isn't one of these things that you can just click and download off the site. You have to, purchase it and then email them, and they'll verify things, and then they will email. Basically, they're a bit paranoid about you having a PDF and then sharing it around the entire community. So they're trying to personalise every PDF, so it's got your name all over it, basically.
Which Mantic did for all their Kickstarter PDFs.
But it does mean that trying to get hold of a copy of this, when you just want to have a quick download or something and have a look at it, you have to jump through several hoops.
But given as a converse example, though, the Lardies, you buy a PDF. End of story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, obviously, it's the way they've chosen to do business. Not the easiest. But it's their new edition, and as I say, it's English Civil War. Maybe. It's a period I kind of think maybe I should do. But having said that, I've got so many other things on the go at the moment. So, yes, but potentially worth a look.
Moving on from rules to figures. Friend of the show, the Dice Bag Lady, celebrating 6 years in business, apart from anything else.
Indeed.
Congratulations, Annie.
Congratulations, Annie, and happy birthday.
More importantly, she's just announced a range of female orcs, which are, quote, simply cool, not gross or comedy. And they are. They look really good.
They are nice, aren't they?
Yeah, they are very nice.
Yeah, I really like that. I might actually pick some of those up just to have a play with.
No, you shock me.
And they are, if you're interested in a suitable warband for Frostgrave or something like that, or heroes in something like Kings of War or the like, they look very eminently grabbable, I'd say.
And people may be pleased to know that we've got coming back on the show soon. So we're looking forward to chatting to Annie in a month or so.
That's right. Talking of rules on things and new figures, Black Hat.
Oh, yeah.
They've this caught my eye for various reasons. They've got some new releases for Martian Empires.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
which is an 18mm Martian game. And I'm thinking, who do I know who's got some 18mm Martian stuff? Oh, yeah, it's me.
Oh, this stuff from this suddenly defunct Kickstarter.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. I might actually pick up a copy of Martian Empires and have a little look at it, just to have a look. But yeah, they got some really nice little figures out there. Sort of World War I-esque style.
Yeah, they got all sorts of bits and pieces, haven't they?
Yeah.
It's a surprisingly big range.
Yeah. So that's one that's going down for research only.
Okay, so back to rules for a minute. Interesting new release from Blast from the Past. New rapid fire supplement. And I got sent this to review for Miniature Wargames. Really interesting. It's a supplement for Normandy. So it looks at, there's 13 scenarios in total. There are 10 standalone, and then there are 3 which link in 3 battles around Carandon. So this is called Normandy Battle Games, and it's available from the Rapid Fire site. Now, Rapid Fire has an interesting force composition because it's not 1-to-1. So whilst you're effectively playing, I think it's a brigade level because you're fighting with multiple battalions. But actually, each battalion, when you start looking at the figures, effectively equates to something like a platoon. So even with the forces that they give in Rapid Fire, they're effectively like company level scenarios.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one because you're literally playing with like a company's worth of infantry, but you've got a battalion's worth of support.
In much the same way that a lot of people use Blitzkrieg Commander.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's that style. But Rapid Fire was always it's not a bad little game. And their supplements, they were lovely.
Just
really good scenarios and
their supplements are stunning. And to be fair, this one really good. I mean, it's beautifully produced. Really, really nice stuff. Great for inspiration. Only problem I found is that weird size tables. 7x5 is the average. And I'm thinking, who plays on a 7x5 anymore?
Rich Clark.
Sorry, Rich.
Next question.
Yeah.
No, it's one of these. Here I am with a 6x4 and they're going 7x5. So okay, you end up losing 6 inches around the edge. But
quite a lot of the Lardies in shotgun scenarios are on 6x5, which is even weirder.
Yeah. But as I say, worth a look. Some nice scenarios and some nice battlefields. So that's Normandy Battle Games by Rapid Fire.
And while we're in Normandy, both PSC and Great Escape are trumpeting the arrival of some more of those really nice 28mm kits from Rubicon. Specifically, we have an M10 Achilles, an M8/M20 armoured car.
I'm sorry, get that right. The M10 was not the Achilles.
You're right, pedant.
The British version was the Achilles with the 17-pounder. The M10 was the Wolverine.
This is true. You are so right.
But with the kit, you can do both.
As I was saying before I was interrupted, also the M8 M20 8-wheel armoured car.
Oh, they're cool. I so love the M8.
The ubiquitous and everybody's favourite little tank destroyer, the Hetzer.
Yeah, I'm getting one of them.
Can't go wrong with a Hetzer. It's Hitler's obsession with putting a gun on something. In this case, yet another Panzer 38T chassis.
Yeah. What have we got left? We've got loads of these 38Ts. I'll slap
right.
a gun on it.
Slap a gun on it.
Yeah.
It'll do. And they're ubiquitous, and they're actually a lovely model.
Mm. I do have a picture on my desktop of Lemmy driving one of those. It's just a fantastic picture. That's Lemmy from Motorhead. In the Hetzer, with a big grin on his face.
Wouldn't you have?
Yeah.
I like it.
Something a bit different is a book coming out in September, written by Rick Priestley and John Lambshead, called Tabletop Wargames, a Designer's and Writer's Handbook.
Oh, yeah.
And here was my thinking. It was going to be the ultimate guide to point systems.
That's chapter 3, 4, and 5.
If you're listening, Henry, grab a copy.
I must admit, I tweeted this during that whole thing that Henry cooked up for the VFTV. The one thing I wanted to ask him at some point was, how shaggy were the dogs?
That was a brilliant story. I nearly crashed the car.
That's okay. For folks who haven't heard that, that's on the View from the Veranda podcast, the first 10 minutes. It's worth a listen. Hugely inventive.
And if you fast forward to about an hour 38, you get to hear Henry call me a complete. What was it, Neil? There was a bleep. I couldn't quite hear it.
Indeed, it's a family show, folks.
I haven't got that far yet. The damn thing's over 3 hours long, and I have to do it in 15-minute chunks on the commute.
Sorry, spoiler alert. I should have said spoiler alert. Something happens an hour and 38 in. And I spat my lunch out when I listened to it. Sorry, we digressed ever so much. Tabletop Wargames, Design and Writer's Handbook by Rick Beasley and John Lambshead.
Indeed, and it's out in September and already up for pre-order on Amazon. Good old Amazon.
Yeah. I might go and leave a quick review.
Don't be hating on Amazon.
Mind you, having said that, are you sure that the publication date is correct? Because if you remember, they put the Wargames Compendium up for pre-order on Amazon, and Henry hadn't even finished writing it.
Yeah, but how much of that was due to Henry's predicted deadlines?
I couldn't possibly comment.
You realise he's now going to call me names next episode?
Oh, certainly. Now, on the last show, we were talking about Otherworld releases, and the fact that one of the things they were releasing was Gnolls. And then something was announced not too long ago, and I could see, even as soon as I saw the announcement, I saw Mr. Hobbs doing a happy dance.
Yeah. The next pack of plastics for Frostgrave is plastic Gnolls, which look very much like rats from a certain fantasy game that was very popular until it changed it. But they look lovely. Big man-sized rats running around with their gnarly teeth. So, yeah, looking forward to those.
And just to wrap up something we've been flogging to death a bit on this episode, namely Kickstarters, I ran across today a very interesting series of articles on, of all things, Beasts of War, about the Shattered Earth miniatures game, produced by Massive Awesome, a.k.a. Simon Barlow and John Taylor. They have been writing a long series of blog articles on how they've been pitching and figuring out how to run their Kickstarter, and it starts today. It's a post-apocalyptic tabletop skirmish game of wondrous technology and existential horror. Full marks for different.
Is there zombies in it?
Not exactly, actually. They look to be really scary, demonic, undead type things, but there are no zombies.
Oh, I'm not interested. For me, it's zombie or nothing.
Gosh, I don't know. Some people.
And is that it for the hobby users time around? Have you got anything else?
I think that might well be it.
I think that's it.
Right. Well, cool. Crikey. Through the hobby news in record time. Incredible. So that's the hobby news. So, on to the feature parts of our show. And when we come back, we'll be talking with Byron Collins. Have you ever wondered what's going on in wargaming? We do too. So come with us as we go behind the hobby with the Meeples and Miniatures interview. We'd like to welcome to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast Byron Collins of Collins Epic Wargames. Hello, Byron. Welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. How are you all?
We're great, thanks. How you doing? You all right?
Good. Very good.
So, as you can tell, Byron is not in the UK. Byron, where are you lucky to hail from?
I'm in Virginia, Suffolk, Virginia, which is eastern coast, U.S.
Mm-hmm. Did you catch the snowstorm a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, it was pretty light here. We had very little, but here if there's an inch that falls, the whole place shuts down. So it's not really well suited for snow. So it was a couple of days off. The kids were off from school, so that was nice. But
that sounds
not too bad.
That sounds like most of the UK, I think. Outside of Scotland.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. It's great to have you on the show and to talk to you. Obviously, on the hobby news over the last couple of shows, we have been talking about the Polyversal Kickstarter. People may remember way back, episode 124, I believe it was. We spoke to Ken about his work that he was doing on Polyversal, and at the time it was still very much in the design phase.
Right.
And then, obviously, at some point we said, "Oh, we'd love to get you back on." We got to this point, and Ken very manfully decided, Byron, to put you front and centre. So it is great to talk to you. Now, before we carry on with the rest of the show, when we have a new guest on the show, the first thing we like to do is to get them to kind of take us through their gaming background, how they got into wargaming, and what they've been doing, what sort of thing they're into. So, can you give us a history of how you got into wargaming?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be brief with it, but yeah, I didn't know this whole segment of this industry even existed until, and I think a lot of people got introduced with Axis and Allies. And as a teenager, I remember playing that. And of course, it took 2 weeks to play that board game, and had the little plastic pieces, and it was a lot of fun. But my friend at the time, he introduced me to that, and he said, "Here, try this." And we had a good time with it. We moved on to some other, I guess, popular games, Magic the Gathering, the card game, Dungeons and Dragons. We played RPG quite a bit, and that was a lot of fun. Then we went on to kind of didn't know, like I said, that all these war games existed, other than we knew about a game called MBT, which was a board war game. I would call that a true board war game. Yeah. But we didn't know how to play. And I remember opening that box, and he owned it, my friend, and he said, "Look at this." And I opened it. This is really cool. And we looked at all the stuff and just put it right back in the box, because it's just overwhelming. So we tried to play that, and we just never got very far. So then we were thinking, well, why don't we see what else is out there? And so we kind of did, and then nothing really fit what we wanted to do. So kind of a hodgepodge. We went and saw one day some micro machines that were a toy, Yeah. It had the military micro machines. They had aircraft and tanks and all these things. Not really to scale, but they were just kind of cool. And we picked up a few of those, and then we were thinking, why don't we do something with these? And along the lines, thinking along Axis and Allies, we thought, well, why don't we make a game? And so we started to make kind of our own, what I would call homebrew rules. Yeah. To suit those miniatures. And, essentially toy figure gaming at that point. So I didn't really realize it at the time. And we still didn't know that this whole hobby games market existed. So we went into playing that quite a bit, and it became this challenge to make it work. And so we had a lot of fun with it. So it was just experimenting with design, different home brew sets of rules, and trying to get something that would work. And we called it Frontline General. So that was kind of our name for it. Right. So that's how we kind of got started. And then after went into business, based on, thinking, well, we could sell this. We got it to the point where we thought it was pretty fun, and we thought, well, we should be able to sell this. Well, that's a lot harder than it sounds. So we decided to go ahead and give it a shot, and we did not succeed. It was me and a partner at the time, and we decided, this is too much work. We're just going to stop. And so we did. So we dissolved the company that we made. And I just shelved it. I put it away for a good 8 years or so. And then a game came out called Axis and Allies Miniatures. Yeah. Which, having been a fan of Axis and Allies, we thought, well, let's try that. And it was a collectible miniatures game. We got it. We played it. And then we got so mad at the rules, to be honest, that snipers could fire at aircraft and whatever. There's different things we just didn't like, that we just thought, I thought, well, I'm going to bring that game out of the closet. And so I brought that game back out of the closet and started working on it again. So in between, we played some different mass market collectible miniatures games like Mage Knight and Mech Warrior.
Yeah.
And so, some of the more, I guess, mass market style games. And then learned about Board Game Geek, learned about Euros, played some Power Grid, played Agricola later on, but kept returning to creating my own games.
Yeah.
So we weren't in business together anymore, so I formed my own company and worked up to releasing Frontline General Italian Campaign in 2008. And that was my first game, self-published.
Yeah.
Which I also released as a free print and play, the full game. So, I wasn't in it and still never been in it to make money. It was for just throwing a design out there to see if other people would like it too. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a not so brief history, but that's how I got started with war games.
When you're not in the midst of designing and playing your own games, what sort of games do you enjoy?
I like to, right now I've got a 5 and 7-year-old sons, and they love Star Wars, so we play Star Wars X-Wing miniatures a lot.
Oh, cool.
And that's a great game that I can play with them and get them into. The different Euros. King of Tokyo is a lot of fun for them.
Oh, yeah.
I like Power Grid. I've always liked that game as a Euro. But most of the time, I'm playing my own designs. I'm playing in order to design and test. And Ken's game, Polyversal, is taking up a lot of my playtime, which is fun. It's not a complaint. I love the game.
Mm-hmm.
My own Spearpoint line, that's got 4 products in it now. So there's, when I'm not designing and play testing, there's not a whole lot of time left over unless I'm playing with my kids.
Yeah.
So then I focus on that.
So you mentioned that at some point you decided that you were going to go and publish your own game. Was that something that you kind of just accidentally fell into, sort of thing, or got to the point where you kind of went, well, I've got this stuff, let's have a look at seeing how we publish it? Yeah. How did you actually get into that in the first place?
Well, it just kept building, and then I realized, well, if I'm going to sell a game, I need to be a business. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I needed to be able to sell a game. Well, to be able to sell a game, I needed a business license. To get a business license, I needed to form a company. So I kind of learned on my own, and what all was involved, and even documented that as I went, because I knew that there was other people like me. So I've always enjoyed passing on that information to others. Even there's a pinned post in the Board Game Geek Design forum where it's called Game Design and Self-Publishing, a resource for game designers. It's been pinned since 2008, and it's still up and still, I think, relevant and helpful to people who want to have their own go at it. Because like I said, I had no clue, and I made a lot of mistakes with the release of my first game. But that led to distributors taking notice, and I met one of the Alliance representatives at Gen Con. That was the first show I ever went to. It was the largest in the U.S., which was also a mistake. I went to Gen Con in 2008, released the game, and it did okay. It surprisingly did well. If I did it all over again, the game that would be my first would be a lot simpler. It would be the Spearpoint game.
Yeah.
So, hindsight, but because the Italian campaign was really a niche game. It was basically a board game that drove a campaign for miniatures. Essentially, it was a campaign system.
Oh, right, okay.
And it was fun. It works. It was more complex than I think would appeal to a big audience. So realizing that, and realizing that now I have a company and I need to sell games, and I want to kind of keep designing games because it's fun, I decided to work on something simpler. And going into one of the shows, I remember one of my friends from another company said, why don't you just show the combat part? Because that's people rolling dice. They're having fun. So I thought that's a great idea. So I just broke out a few cards from the main big game. So I was trying to explain the full game to people, and it was just too much. And so we broke out this little combat demo, played it. I think it was Historicon in 2009. And I thought, this could just work by itself. And so that's how Spearpoint was born, was from the combat portion of my first game. And we broke it out. I broke it out and made it its own game, a card game. And that was fun. It was a lot of fun. And it was quick to demonstrate. So it was good for me at conventions because I could quickly show someone how it worked and even play a full game. So that led to Spear Point 43, which was released in 2010. That was my second game. And then that did really well. It actually got, by then I knew kind of the costs involved, which was one of my mistakes from the first game. I well underestimated what it really costs to print and to make stuff in bulk like that.
Yeah.
And so to avoid those mistakes, I didn't make the same mistakes again. So the second game, I was able to make it affordable, and the game did really well. So then that led to the third, and the third was an expansion for it, which actually got me an Origins Award nomination for that terrain-based expansion called the Village and Defensive Line Map expansion for it, which basically took a card game and added terrain and line of sight, and basically a lot of miniatures rules to the system, and played very very well.
Yeah.
And then continued that.
Some would say that's an unusual step to take with the card game.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the box for the expansion was what most people thought was the basic game, because the card game's in this little box. And then, I'm like, no, the expansion is this big box here. And it was, nobody understood. And so I had to explain and show the card game plays by itself. If you want a quick game that's 30 minutes, and it's very quick and fun. Or you can go a little deeper with it and step into this a little bit more complex game that adds, some of the things that are abstracted in the original. So it takes a deck build type force builder and turns it into a board game. And it actually worked really, really well. It was well received. It was actually my first Kickstarter was for that game, and it was in 2012, I believe, when I released it. So yeah, that went well. And then continued with that line and developed and released 2 games last year in it called Spear Point 43 Eastern Front, with the Soviet Germans, of course, and a expansion for that called the Heavy Weapons expansion. So that's a 4-game line now that I take, and that's been my, I guess, biggest draw at conventions and stuff, and it does really well. So that's the Spear Point line. So yeah.
So all that is World War II based.
Yes.
Why World War II?
World War II because I have some relatives that fought in World War II. My uncle kind of inspired me to be, interested in the history of the World War II, and so he ended up as a Navy commander, and he was the small boat. He was responsible for the loading of men and equipment in small boats, right, for Utah Beach at D-Day invasions.
Oh, right, okay.
So, yeah, and he actually trained a big number of people that would drive and be on the landing craft. He trained them at, I remember they trained a lot in the UK, actually, at Slapton Sands, I believe was the place. Mm-hmm. Exactly where that is, but that was one thing he mentioned. But yeah, he kind of inspired me, and he gave me a couple books to read and, learn more about it. And so I've always had that interest in World War II from my relatives that were in it. My grandfather was a Army Air Corps ball turret gunner in B-24 Mitchells. So he was short enough that he could fit into that role. So it was,
yeah.
It was interesting hearing their stories growing up. So
yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Wasn't Shepton Stands where they had that big disaster just before D-Day? When,
yeah.
A couple of E-boats got in there.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. And I'm not sure. I remember talking to my uncle, and before he passed away, I was able to interview him, which my family and his family really appreciated, because nobody had really recorded all of what he wanted to say and talk through. So it was great. I sat down with him, and for 4 to 5 hours, we just back and forth, asked him question after question, knowing enough at that time about the history of it to ask the right questions. So it was great to just interview him, essentially, and record all of that for our family. So it was pretty inspirational. So that's where the World War II interest comes from.
Sounds really good, really interesting, especially that interview. I mean, have you thought about speaking to museums? Because over here in the UK, there's an awful lot about collecting oral history from veterans.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few sort of government things to actually sort of try and get recordings and get them into a central archive.
Right.
I don't know if there's anything similar in.
It would probably be a good idea. Yeah, I haven't done that. I basically typed it all up and gave it to to his family, to his immediate family.
Yeah.
And let them, decide what to do with it. But that would be a good thing to do, I think.
Over here, there's this whole Forgotten Voices of World War II series that has masses of interviews from different areas of the conflict.
Mm-hmm. And I actually released that interview when I was doing newsletters for my company for the Italian campaign intro. I shared that with people on the newsletter list, so it's online somewhere. I can probably find the link for you. But it was an interesting thing to do. So it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier that when you went into business, which I've got to say is a really ballsy decision. I mean, just to just be working on a game and go, I'm going to start my own company. I mean, most people will just sort of put a PDF together and maybe give it to a few mates. You mentioned that you started putting together stuff on Wargaming, so it sounds like you're quite passionate about sort of sharing your knowledge on.
Oh yes.
On how to get into business.
And a lot of that is making mistakes. Making mistakes. You don't want to see other people make the same mistakes. And I get emails a lot from, people saying, I've got this great idea for a game and I want to, because I'm a publisher now, so some people submit, designs. Do you want to publish this? And I'll write back why I do or don't. And then a lot of people, I just say, well, look, I'm not interested, but here's how you can do it yourself, or here's some other contacts you can try to pitch it to. Because some of these games are interesting, they're just not what I want to do. But a lot of people that come to me, they ask for help. I remember if I had reached out to some people and said, hey, I need some help figuring out game production, or licensing, or whatever, or should I publish my game, or should I do it myself, or should I send it to a publisher? Those questions are asked by a lot of people that want to see a homebrew set of rules or some game they've made, try to take it further and send it out there. And the thing I'd say is it's not easy. It's not easy at all to do it yourself. You can do it yourself. I'm proof of that after 5 games, but it takes a lot of dedication. It takes a lot of hard work and a lot of research into doing it the right way. So I'm pretty proud of it. I'm where I am, and I'm still in business. A lot of companies I see come into business, they'll produce one game and then they're done. They either go out of business because they, not managed their money correctly, or they've made bad decisions, or they just realize that, hey, this isn't for me, or it's too much work. I don't know all the reasons, but I see a lot of companies that start up, and even especially today with the world of Kickstarter, they start up, they produce one game and they're out. So the idea too is to help people build their business and not fail after one game. If they want to actually make games or publish games, then I like games. I like to see new games come out, and it ultimately helps the industry, helps everybody. So is that something you do as a professional way, or is it just done as a sort of ad hoc? Here's some information, off you go. I mean, yeah, I've gone into detail with some people where I'll go back and forth, and they'll be asking, the most common request is, because I do all my printing in the U.S., the most common request is from U.S.-based people that are wanting to publish their own game. They're asking, where do you go for printing sources? Because most people go to China. And I say, I've never used China. And yeah, that's easy to find sources in China, but I take the example of Mayfair Games. They print everything in the U.S. and they're a successful large company, one of the biggest. And I don't know. I mean, I know that they could save some money if they were to go overseas, but one of the things that sticks with me is I was at a trade show one time, the Gamma trade show, and Larry, their I believe he's the vice president, he said, we print everything in the U.S. for one major reason, and the major reason is if you print in China, this is what I tell everybody who comes to me, if you print in China and something's messed up, especially if it's your fault, if something's messed up, you have no recourse. There's no way that you can go to that company and get it fixed. Now, some companies are better than others, no doubt. From what I understand, I've not worked with them, but I've seen and read plenty of horror stories about people who take funding, let's say, from a successful Kickstarter, send it to a company overseas, and something gets messed up, or the quality isn't what they want, or something happens to the product when it's shipped over on the boat. Whatever happens, essentially it's your fault. I mean, you're responsible for it, because you can't sue a Chinese company in a U.S. court, for example. Mm. So there's a lot to be careful of when you set out to produce something, and the big warning I have for Kickstarter project creators in particular is, if you take money, you're liable. You are liable for producing a product, and you better be able to do so. Whether or not it's on time, okay, but I've had my own challenges with that. But to take money, you better have a business set up so that you're protected, and have a good plan, and understand that it is expensive. Don't underestimate your costs, and there's a whole lot to be careful of. So that's part of that post on Board Game Geek, was to kind of give a lot of things to think about before somebody takes that leap like I took and makes mistakes. I mean, I made mistakes. My biggest mistake with the first game was it was so expensive to make, because I did it in such a small quantity, and the pieces were expensive, the parts were expensive. There was just too much. There's too many components in the game. And that drove the cost up so much that I was only able to sell it directly. There was no way that I could support a distributor price structure, distributors or retailers. It was just too expensive. Yeah. So that game was always a direct sell only, which was a mistake. I mean, it should have been fewer components so that it could be priced to at least have the chance to be put into a store. So, that's the kind of things I warn people of, is, pricing and component cost and where to go to print. And I also share resources. I share production sources. The boxes that I have printed for every game are from a company in my hometown, which is great. It's a huge box manufacturer in Virginia. And you can find those local printers, give them a chance to get a quote. And then there's other printers that are very good that specialize in games, and I'll send them there. It doesn't hurt to get quotes, and then my thought with that is, yeah, I'm going to share my production sources because it helps keep those businesses active and in business, because I certainly can't support them on my own. So the idea is, okay, if you need some boxes, go here. If you need dice, go here. I've had good luck with them. If you need counters, boards, chits, here's another good source, whatever. And then I tell them, get quotes in multiple quantities so that you can see the difference in printing 500, 1,000, 2,000. So you can see where the economies of scale start working for you. So
it does seem to be something that a lot of the more naive Kickstarter creators seem not to consider is A, having a business plan, and B, the whole concept of economies of scale. And the other one I seem to notice that Kickstarters seem to fall flat on their face on these days for some reason is postage.
Yes, shipping is very expensive. It's something not to underestimate.
I don't know what it's like over, certainly over here we have a huge price break at 2 kilograms. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure I've seen Kickstarters shoot themselves in the foot when they discover that their final all-up basic pledge box kicks in at 2.2 kilos, and suddenly the postage per unit just went up by about 300%.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's something to be aware of. In fact, my second game, I designed it with that in mind. The box, I designed it to fit a U.S. Postal Service small flat rate box. So it'll fit in that small flat rate box, and I can ship it a lot cheaper than the next size up. So that's the kind of things, you gotta think about. And I totally agree. And there's some Kickstarter project creators that do their diligence and they think through all these things, and that's great. They're going to do better. I see a lot of projects that go on Kickstarter and they have a goal, and the goal is $5,000 or whatever, and I know they're going to be in trouble financially. I just can see it because they're almost guaranteed to be a success funding wise, and then they're on the hook to make something. They're on the hook to make a game. Hopefully, they've started a business and created this game in the business's name. Otherwise, they're personally liable, and it's unfortunate. I hope that before starting a project like that on Kickstarter, people do their research, because it's really important, and you can really make some missteps and generate some heavy debt if you're not careful.
Well, we've seen that quite a bit recently, haven't we? It's quite sad.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Gamma trade show. What? I'm not aware of that. So.
Oh, it's a trade show in March. It's done by Gamma, which is Game Manufacturers of America, and it's an annual show where it's just open for retailers and distributors, but they've got this whole manufacturing track where I encourage new publishers or people who are planning to start up to go, because they have this whole track where people like Larry from Mayfair will talk. I've actually been invited to speak kind of from the small company side, and I've done that for 3 years now, and that's something I really enjoy doing. I get an hour seminar to walk, 20 or 30 people through kind of a presentation of starting up as a publisher. So it's kind of an honor to get invited to speak. And it's something I enjoy. I enjoy helping other people, like I said, start up their own company, become a publisher, do it the right way. Hopefully avoid some of the mistakes I've made. It's a fun little show. It's meant for companies, publishers to show off, their latest and greatest to distributors and to retailers. So it's not really it's not for the direct consumer. But there's press that goes. It's a lot of good exposure on the retail side.
I don't think there's anything like that at all in the UK, unless they keep it a secret. Which they might. So Collins Epic War Games, and you've got these 5 games out, World War II, and you, as you say, the sort of card base and uses campaign systems for other games. So the next game you're working on, obviously following that route, is a sci-fi game.
Yes, it's a sci-fi miniatures game.
Yeah,
right.
Which really ties in with your current portfolio, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's so similar. Yeah. It's quite a departure. Yeah.
I was going to say, not wishing to be facetious, but it's kind of, how on earth did you get to that point?
It was from, so the story is that I was at a local show, and I met up with a local game group that I found because I needed someone to help me paint all of these miniatures for my first game. And that's how I met my local game group that I hang out with, the Hangar. This guy, Carl, who's now passed away, great guy. He painted all the miniatures so that I could actually present my first game. Well, I also met, I figured out that they were starting up their own convention. So I supported it. I went and started exhibiting there. And one of the games I saw played there from a local guy was from Ken Whitehurst, and he's the creator of Polyversal. So he had this, it reminded me of myself. I mean, I had this homebrew set a long time ago, for the game that became my first. And then I saw this game in play at this show, and I saw a lot of people having fun. And I go up to it because what caught my eye was, and I've always liked sci-fi, but what caught my eye was Ken had the foresight to take a full-size Mr. Coffee Maker paint it black completely, and put one of those science balls in place of the coffee decanter. And it was this, he called it Mr. Teleporter. And he had it set up on the table and was drawing people to it like moths to a light. And literally, I came over too, and I said, "What is this?" He said, "It's Mr. Teleporter." I said, "I'm Byron Collins." He said, "I'm Ken." So I said, "Okay, what is this game?" So anyway, he explained the game to me, and I loved it. I mean, I was watching people play it, and then his approach was even better because I thought, well, what's different about this game than some other science fiction game out there, that's out there now? What's the difference? And he said, well, it's 6mm, and I've always wanted to have a game where I could use everything. So I made one because there wasn't one out there. And I'm thinking, okay, that's different. So he had literally miniatures from everything you can think of that he's collected over the years in play in this game. And it was fun. It was working. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this is really, really cool. And I think it's a great idea, because a lot of people have hundreds of miniatures that maybe are sitting in a closet box somewhere because they no longer play that game, but they're really cool. I mean, they're really neat models. So that was kind of his idea, and he's got it at this show. He's playing it, and the people playing it were just having a blast, and they picked it right up. So I'm thinking, okay, that's nice too, because it's simple to teach, simple to pick up, and I'm watching it played, and people are just having a blast. So at that point, I realized, maybe Ken's onto something. And so I thought about it a lot, and I thought, well, I approached Ken and said, Ken, I want to play your game, just me and you, at a local store, and we set that up, and we went to Atlantis Comics and Games in Norfolk. We set up and played a full game, and after that, I said, I want to publish this. I want to make this game. I want to bring it to the market because I think it's brilliant. I think it's a really neat game, and I still love the game. I think it's I really like it, or I wouldn't be publishing it because it's a lot of work to do that. So yeah, that's kind of how I met Ken, was Mr. Teleporter at a local convention, and then we just went from there. And he was also a supporter of my Spearpoint game, so I knew him from that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I must admit, being British, I just had to look up Science Ball. We called it, so just to explain for anybody who doesn't realise what a Science Ball is, it's one of these like plasma balls, electric plasma ball things. We don't know them by the name of Science Ball, but now I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, so Polyversal. I mean, we've spoken about it a lot.
Yes, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's okay. We'll obviously be sending you a bill later, but but I mean, the thing that attracted me to the game was what Ken was saying and what you've reiterated about the use of different manufacturers' figures in one game.
Right.
We know that obviously the Kickstarter has been going now for a little while, and it's going okay, which is good. But one of the big things that you need when you start talking about using multiple manufacturers' figures is you need a way of getting those into the game.
Right.
And we've heard this concept of the combat design tool.
Yes.
But we're not really sure what it does. So is this going to be a sort of web-based tool where you can put in stats and it'll just give you a PDF that you can then print out, or is it something a bit more deeper? Cool.
That's it, yeah. So it'll have built into it, and we'll have it all documented in the rules, in the hard copy. So you can see what goes into, the tool. So you can see the hard copy of what it is and what backs that up. So you can see, what feeds into that web-based application. So it's not just a black box. So you'll fully understand, how these different features of each unit that you might design are affecting the cost. So the points-based system that we have balances everything out. So that what's neat about it is the way that you might design, or I might design a Typhark tank from Plasma Blast will be different than Neil. So you can have two different tiles for the same model, and it's fine. And what's nice too is you can upload, instead of our artworks, the ones we make, we'll have artwork, and that's part of what we're funding as well. So we're trying to fund the tool, and that's the web application, and that's a powerful tool. You can literally take anything that's 6mm, and it handles it. And when I say anything, I'm talking science fiction, roughly mid 20th century on up. So it's very vehicle based. I mean, it does have a lot of, you can handle flyers, you can handle infantry, grav tanks, just anything, any type of, I guess, typical sci-fi models that you would see made by any company you can think of that's making 6mm. It's compatible with everything. And Ken literally has a spreadsheet of 600 different models created that he's used in testing and gameplay. But the tiles, what comes out is a tile that has all of the stats that you need to play with it in the game. So if you've got that Typhark tank you created, it'll have on there the weapons, the arc of fire, the range, the personnel in a tank, and air values to hit, essentially, the damage values, everything. All the basic stats are driven by different classes of units. So you can kind of look at it and look at the relative size. Is it a class 1? Is it a class 5? And so forth. And that drives a lot of it. And that also drives what goes into the damage track, because there's a damage track on the tile too. Right. So that literally everything you need to play with that model is right on that tile. The flip side of the tile, which we haven't really shown in the Kickstarter, the flip side will have cost information. And that'll give you the info that you need to add that tile and essentially that unit to your army for a particular game. And it'll tell you, well, how many points is a particular model going to cost you? How many points does it cost to make it a commander, and so forth? And that point system, like I said, just balances everything out. It's all in the same scale. So you can literally bring anything to the table, and that's part of the fun of it, is going to be to see what people create, because we can't foresee, we don't have any way to foresee how this tool is going to be used. I think it's going to be great. And so part of the idea too is that this will be very community driven. So if we've got a lot of players that, or even just a few players that are creating these tiles, it'll be shared with everyone, so hopefully, so that they can download it and use it and try it. And then the idea is to kind of vote up the coolest designs. What's the best use? What's the best Typhark tank tile that you've seen, or whatever. And that's kind of the idea. So you may see, a dozen different ways to design the same unit. It's going to cost something different with each one, as far as adding that model to the game. And there's a lot of just neat options you can do. But the way you design it, you essentially are going to figure out, well, what type of unit is it? Is it a vehicle? Is it an infantry unit? Is it a flyer? You start there. You start with the relative size. What's the class? And then you move on to what weapons is it fielding? And you can pick. In fact, we're about to release a little 2-minute video where Ken walks you through designing a tile. And he'll walk you through the Insagon tank and how he selected the various, variables that go into the tile. And then the system will take care of some of those stats based on what you input. And again, for players creating their own, you'll be able to upload a photo of your painted miniature, so that when you print this out, that tile has 100% likeness, because it's a photo of your model, with what you've got on the table. So the other cool thing with the tiles is it gives players a visual command structure. So we released a video called Command and Control, where it walks through how to form battle groups. And that's part of that's the reason these tiles are hexagonal instead of a card or square or whatever. They interlock together. At the center, you'll have a command unit, and attached to that command unit, you'll have up to 6 units that are, and again, the representation here, I don't think I mentioned it, but the representation, one tile can represent many identical combatants, identical models. So you might have one tile for an Insagon tank that has a platoon of Insagons, or however many you want to put it. Each one costs a certain amount, and then it costs a certain amount to form that unit. And then the commander, whichever one you designate as your command unit, costs a little bit more. So that's how the point system works. So you'll be able to fill that up, form your battle groups however you want. And in the game, that's a dynamic control system where you place orders on those tiles to designate what the units are doing. And so you'll use it a lot during the game to keep track of who's in charge of who, basically who's giving orders to who. And those tiles just help you just throughout the game. They're off the table as well. So you have a lot of tracking that you're doing off the table, and on the actual game, on the terrain, you're focused on the miniatures, and you don't clutter it up with a lot of extra stuff. So it looks really good.
Yeah, this is something I noticed in the videos, and just for people who listen to this, if you go onto the Kickstarter, and we will give a link, obviously, the Kickstarter, Byron has produced some videos, showing the basic play plus the command and control. And it's a thing I did like is the fact you got your table, you got your figures on it, you're playing a normal game, but on the side you've then got this sort of visual representation with all the counters on it. Because we've all played games where you just basically end up flooding the table with loads and loads of counters and chits and dice and stuff. I really like that idea. Because I wasn't quite sure on the whole hexagon thing when I first spoke to Ken. I thought it was just a bit gimmicky. But seeing it actually in play, it works. And it just clicked for me. And I think it's going to be a really, really powerful part of the game.
I like it a lot. It makes it a lot easier so that we can put into place a command range. And we know, all right, who are the commanders? And the game itself is all about, a lot of it is about degrading effectiveness. And you'll see as you play that when a unit is in play and it's taking hits, it'll take stress. You might not take the unit out, but you might take its effectiveness down enough to where it's not doing anything useful for the player. So part of the hexagonal tiles are to track that as well. And the current effectiveness, as it drops, affects the unit's ability to fire. It's one of 3 die rolls. There's one die roll. That's one of 3 die types that go into that roll to determine every combat resolution. So part of a mass combat game, we want to quickly resolve combat. And with the system, the way it works is very slick. You have 3 dice you roll with every combat. It doesn't matter what the model is, what type it is, how big it is. And for the different weapons, you're going to basically pick your target, check your range, check your firing arc, and you're going to look at color-coded die types on the card and based on your effectiveness. So your current effectiveness is 1 die, and it might be a D8, let's say. And then you've got a targeting die type, which might be a D6. And then you've got a weapon-specific die type, which might be a D10 or D4. And they go from D4 to D12. And then you've got different bonuses for linked weapons and all kinds of other stuff. But you roll those 3 dice, whatever they are, 1 time. It tells you if you've hit the opponent. It tells you, based on that hit, what damage you did. And any effects from that damage are determined by the opponent's tile and his damage track on the tile. So there's no looking up charts. There's no referring to the rule book. All you really need is a quick reference sheet, and you've got all the information you need right on these tiles. So it's definitely a big integral part of the game, and it works very well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you can see that just from watching the videos. We mentioned the Kickstarters, but let's have a bit of a chat around that, because it's been running now for 15 days,
14 days.
Yeah. So it's now the what is it, 10th of February? It's the 10th of February. It's the 10th of February.
10th or 9th, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got another 45 days to go. Now, there has been talk about the target that you got, because you've got an 80 grand target.
Right.
That's in dollars, which, I've heard some people turn around and say is quite high.
It seems high. I can tell you, having
guilty as charged.
Well, having printed 5 games, this is part of that I was talking about earlier. I know not to underestimate the costs. So that's one thing. And these are the real numbers. This is what we crunched out. The other thing is we're not just funding the game production, because it would be cheaper if we were. We're funding this web-based design tool, and that's not cheap to make. So it's an application plus the game. And that's what really allows the system to shine, is when you can expand it without waiting on us. And that's the whole goal here, is that if we get our funding that we need $80K, then we can afford to do everything we want to do. Now, part of it is accounting for the costs inherent in running a Kickstarter. One is Kickstarter immediately takes 10%. Kickstarter takes 5% off the top, and then Amazon, to process the payments for everyone, takes another 5%. They say 3 to 5. I've always had it work out as 5. I've run, this is my 4th or 5th Kickstarter. I can't remember. I think it's the 5th. But that's not insignificant. So say we hit 80K. We lose 10% off the top. So now we're down to 72K left. I have to print enough copies of the game in order to see that economy of scale work for me as far as the printing cost to keep the MSRP down. So that breakpoint that makes it affordable for this particular game is roughly 1,000 units. I'd like to print more, but all the production is based on 1,000 games of the box game. And working with our partners, that's also the point where I get the way we can include some of the best models, with some of the models that we like from them, is we get a discount for buying in bulk through them. And they're doing special casting runs for all of these. So to be able to fund printing, 1,000 games, essentially all the counters, all the dice, all the tracking information, the shrink wrap, everything that goes into it, the boxes, the rules, the rule book itself is not cheap to make. It's a fairly hefty rule book. And then you've got the miniatures themselves. For our box games, we'll have miniatures and tiles in there, so people, out of the box can have something to play. And the idea with working with these multiple manufacturers, yes, they're existing models, but we also want to expose people to what's out there. A lot of people may not know anything about Plasma Blast games. They've never seen one of their models, and they're never going to look at them if it's not right in front of them, in my opinion. So you open the box, you're going to see the ideas. You'll see, wow, this Instagon tank is really cool, and I like this Leehawk flyer. What else do they sell? And so the idea with our suppliers and the people we're working with, Hawk, Plasma Blast Brigade, Michael World, Dark Realm, the idea is people will open the box and see 2 or 3 models from them, and they'll like one particular line or like them all, and decide, well, I want to buy some more Instagon tanks, or I want to buy some more of these walkers from Hawk. And they'll go and order that, and then use the application that we're doing, the combatant tile design tool, to make their own game piece for those models. So we're not competing with the manufacturers out there. We're trying to bring them all together, and it's working. I mean, I think the concept works really well. We just need people behind us. We need people to understand what our goal is, and our goal is not to just make another box game with a bunch of models in there. That's to bring new people into the hobby. If I'm at a convention and I just have a book, it's very difficult to bring people over to the table and say, here, look at this book. I mean, It's much better to have a box set of something. And so that's the idea with the starter games, is that we can introduce people to 6mm and to multiple lines in one box, and then encourage them to go support the rest of that line. So, if they like something in particular, they can add on to the game, and you don't have to wait on us for expansions. So we may expand it. We may throw out some additional tiles that we designed, that we professionally print, but you don't have to wait on that. You can get the game and keep it, and just expand it infinitely. So,
yeah, I suppose this is the one huge difference with Polyversal as opposed to what else is out there at the moment. So many games these days sell a system, for want of a better, like a closed universe.
Right.
So it is a case of, right, okay, so we are selling this game, this is the setup, this is the background, and these are the models.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're doing the whole thing. And here you are turning around and saying, okay, what we're doing is we're providing a framework for you and a rule set for you, but actually what you do with it is much more within your control. And,
right.
As I say, so often, it's providing that extra freedom, isn't it? To say, actually, you can use whatever 6mm sci-fi you like,
mm-hmm.
plug it into our game, we'll provide you with the tools to do so, and as a result, it doesn't matter if you've got a range of models for a game that has died a long time ago, for example, or is no longer produced.
Exactly.
Hey, what happens now? We can actually, you can actually use those models and we give it a complete new lease of life.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so that is the huge difference. We don't force you to use our miniatures because we don't make any miniatures. And that's not my goal. We're not making models. We're showing what can be done with what's out there. And there's plenty of great companies that are already making great stuff. And I don't need to go compete with them. So this, with working with them instead, has been really neat because, we've got their support. We've got Tony at Brigade. He just blogged about Polyversal actually the other day. And, Marios from Greece, Plasma Blast Games, he's excited about it. I mean, he's a small company, and it's exposure for his line. Even no matter what happens with our Kickstarter, hopefully these companies benefit because there's just so many great things out there that people can go get, and so that's the goal. Is it's open-ended. It's almost, I would call it almost open source even, since we're documenting what that design tool does. There's no black box. There's no, secrets as far as the design tool or anything like that. It's wide open. And in fact, the story even, we're going to provide a framework for that story, which we provide a little bit in our Kickstarter video. But once we get that framework up, the idea is we're going to open it up. We're going to open up to players to fill in the details. And in fact, here's a timeline, or here's some basics of what's going on in our universe. You don't have to use that if you don't want to. But if you do, here's a wiki type site that you can write in your own story. And in what's, grand vision type stuff, what I'd like to see is battles that people play at their local stores or at home help drive that story and what happens. And that's kind of us, thinking big with 6mm. So it's a great scale. It lets you do massive battles, and then it will put a lot more models on the table. And there's a lot to be said about the scale and the size and the existing ranges that are out there. So we're, the whole goal is bring it all together, put it all in one game, in one excellent rule set. And I will tell you, it's excellent. It's hard to convey that excitement, when you read a Kickstarter page or you watch a single video or 5 minutes worth of a video, because we've been working on this for years. And it's a lot of hard work has gone into it to make it what it is today. And I can tell you, it's unique. It's an exciting project. It's been a lot of fun to work on.
Was it a tough sell to the figure manufacturers? I mean, quite a few of them, they do produce figures within a setting of their own. So
Yeah.
Was it a tough sell to sort of
Yes.
convince them to work with your setting
Yes.
as well?
Absolutely. It was tough to sell the concept. But once people understood, once the manufacturer we're working with understood what we were doing and that we weren't, doing the typical thing, which is, okay, here's a Kickstarter, here's some new models, and here's a new setting, and then you have to play with our models and our setting and our rules. That departure is hard to get a hold of. And I think that may be some of the hesitation of people in the 6 mil community looking at this project. They're like, well, either do one or the other. We received some comments like that. Well, what are these guys doing? I don't think people really understand and grasp the full, intent here. But yes, tough sell to the manufacturers, absolutely. In fact, I approached some of them in person, Hawk Wargames. They were excited about it. They needed to know a lot more details, and we went back and forth on it. Like with all the companies, we went back and forth a lot. Have contracts with them, and we've worked out the details of those contracts. That's part of what took so long from the time Ken was interviewed to now to bring it to Kickstarter, is making sure everything was in place with the suppliers and getting rid of any questions on costs, and then understanding, and like I said, fully understanding what those costs are going to be. It's not a token goal, and that's another thing that kind of is, I think people see Kickstarter projects that have a smaller goal. Let's say it's 40,000, which is half of our goal. Okay. And that's from a large company that's using Kickstarter as a pre-order tool. It's a marketing tool at that point, because that 40,000, it doesn't even begin to pay for the license to use some of the IP that's being put into these games. And it's frustrating for small companies like me that people balk at 80,000 when I know, having produced games, that 80,000 is not a lot of money. When you're talking about making games in bulk to make them affordable at retail, which may not be the goal of some Kickstarter creators, and that's fine. But when you're talking about that kind of strategy, it's not smart to set a small goal and depend on overfunding, because you can get in trouble. I think that's why some people start and then they cancel even when they get funded, and then people are scratching their heads.
Yeah, I think I think it's perhaps more that the companies that do that, and I think we're probably talking about the same one, or one of the several same ones, is they have got themselves in a position where they can very reasonably expect to overfund.
Yes.
And I think there's possibly a perception amongst backers that if it doesn't hit its goal quickly, it's not worth investing.
Right.
And I don't see that as a good thing. And I'm pleased to note that KickTrack currently says you're going to make it.
Good. Well, I hope so.
Question. Looking at your Kickstarter history, since you mentioned it, I noticed that you had 2 goes at Spear Point East and Front. What did you learn from the first one that allowed the second one to succeed?
A lot. In fact, I wrote a blog post about it to help other publishers. The blog is on my Board Game Geek blog called Publisher Perspective, if you want to look it up. But I learned a lot. The main thing I learned was you have to have a gameplay video. I didn't have one. And I'd never pushed Spearpoint. See, Spearpoint 43, the original, was done before Kickstarter. Before people were using Kickstarter for making games. And the way it was, I just made it. I mean, I did a P500 system similar to GMT games, and they use that system. They don't use Kickstarter. And basically funded about half of it in pre-orders, the original Spearpoint. And then the rest of it I funded with my own money, which was a risk and a crazy thing to try to do, but I did it. And that produced 2,000 games. So I printed 2,000 games. It's a card game, so smaller cost. But, and that ended up being successful. It paid off. It was risky, but that's business. It's taking risks. So that was done before Kickstarter. So the first time I've had to try to sell Spearpoint 43 as a standalone game on Kickstarter was Eastern Front. So I launched it thinking, well, I don't, maybe I don't need a whole lot of preview type material. I don't need final art. I don't need this and that. Well, I was incorrect. And so looking back at that Kickstarter, I let it fail. I could have canceled it. And I said, no, you know what? I'm going to leave it up, and it's going to go and run its course and fail. And it did. And that's fine. Because at that point, if you're determined, you'll reorganize and relaunch. And I did. And when I relaunched, I had a really nice 5-minute animated gameplay video, had a better project video, had better information on the page, lowered my cost just a little bit to make some of the things optional. And pledge levels were a little better, a little more clear. And just being clear with the project was the main thing I learned. And, like I said, I blogged about all those different lessons for the relaunch. And then the relaunch was a success. And in fact, it earned more than the original goal for Spirit Point. So
yeah, I was just noticing that you set your goal slightly above what the first one made, and then raced past it. How early in the process did you realize it was going to fail, the first one?
I don't think you really know, because mid-project, I didn't really know until, I let it play out. But mid-project, there's always this flat line, and we're kind of in that now with Polyversal, where you start off and you just rock it up, and that's a good thing. And that's a lot of people who have been waiting on that game, and they fund it, and I really appreciated that. And I appreciate it with Polyversal, and then it flatlines a little bit. And the key to getting through that, I think, is updates and previews and stuff like we're posting. But I think when I realized the first Eastern Front would fail was nearer to the end, because I kind of expected that flat line, but then it just didn't rocket back up at the end. And I thought, you know what? I need to just let it go ahead and fail, reorganize, do it a little bit better. Because once you set one thing I knew that I couldn't change was pledge levels. And you can't change once people, pledge for a level. It's a certain amount, and you can't modify that amount. If you set it at a little bit too high, then you can't lower it. You can create a new pledge that's lower, but you're going to ask all the people to change their, it's just a mess at that point with Kickstarter. So I think I realized near the end that the pledge levels were probably too expensive for that Eastern Front game. And then once I relaunched it, it was a little bit cheaper, it was more affordable shipping, and it worked out. So hence we made a game.
So you just mentioned shipping, and obviously, especially shipping internationally, is hugely expensive, and as we've recently seen, has been the undoing of companies. When you first launched, you very quickly amended your Kickstarter to get to and introduced EU-friendly shipping.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Looking at other projects, actually, I was thinking, because we got some comments that, and I monitor, I'll Google search Polyversal, see what people are talking about. And one of the comments that was common from would-be international backers is it's too expensive to ship it. And so to address that and to try to handle that feedback in a way that was productive for everybody, I looked at how other companies solved that problem. EU-friendly is a term and a logo people have used to state essentially that, you're shipping from within an EU country to an EU country. So it saves the backer on import taxes, which, people had to pay with Eastern Front, which was unfortunate, but that's beyond my control. I have to state the value. I have to state that it's merchandise when I ship it internationally. And then your country, whatever country you're in, is going to charge you an import tax. And that's just how international shipping works. But if you ship from within the EU to an EU country, that doesn't happen based on the volume, from what I understand, based on the volume of whatever that company ships. So that makes, for EU backers, it makes the pledge levels a lot more affordable. So I created different pledge levels, one for each of the major, each of the two main pledges, and then a limited version for early backers, so that there wouldn't be the complaint, well, if you're in the US, you get a limited early backer discount. And so went into that for both EU and rest of the world. And a lot of the EU backers put the update out, and I think even you guys switched over to the EU friendly pledges, which was the idea and the goal, so that it saves everybody some money, and hopefully a backer in the UK or Germany or wherever will see that and say, well, okay, that's affordable shipping. So we put the logo on there, and I wish that was in place before I started, but hindsight. Once you start a project, it just you see all the things that you would modify, and change a little bit to tweak it. And so, that's part of what I've been doing is for the past 2 weeks as this has been running is every day looking at feedback. And we added a support level for people who just wanted the game without the miniatures. For example, we added EU friendly to help with shipping and import taxes. So we listen to feedback. We want to get this game made. I mean, that's our goal. And we want to make that where it's a good value for anybody who backs it. And I think it is. I think the Battle Group Commander level is a great price point. The MSRP is much higher for this game than you would pledge on Battle Group Command support level. So it's a pretty good, I think a pretty good savings. And the idea too is if we do overfund, we have a number of stretch goals. I mean, Kickstarters have stretch goals. We've run them in the past. We have a number of goals that add more models to the basic game. So if you have a box game you're pledging for, and we overfund by some amount, we're going to announce that amount. We'll add another model in with the combatant tile that we design. And so your pledge doesn't go up. It's not an add-on. It just is automatically put in there for Kickstarter supporters. So that's kind of what we're hoping for is if we go higher and we go overfund, it's not all profit for us. That's not our goal. We want to reward people that help us get to the funding level. So if we get to our funding level, we're going to make the game. And that's really exciting. It's already a good value for the box game with all the miniatures. However, if we overfund, we're going to reveal some stretch goals that go into that same box game for Kickstarter supporters. And some of those all the stretch goals rotate through the different partners we've got agreements with. And the first one is from Michael World Armor. It's a Warthog AAAP platoon, 3 models. MSRP on those is $12. So US dollars. So that's the first one. We throw it in there. There's no additional cost to you, no additional shipping. It's not an add-on. And then we go through. We go to Hawk and we add Ares Walkers. We add Brigade's Komodo heavy grav tanks. We add Plasma Blast, Faystorm AA units, Dark Realms Malignant Walker, Plasma Blast. We add the Margast. We add Dark Realms Manigan. So there's a lot of neat stuff that goes into the same box set, and we add combatant tiles for each of them as well. So if we overfund, you get more in the box. That's kind of the idea there. We don't want to just profit on that. We're going to reward everybody for helping us get there. One thing I want to mention too about the artwork in the game, and this is part of the 80K goal as well. We hired the concept artist from Tron Legacy.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he's Bruno Wernick. He's done work for Disney. He's done work for the game Titanfall, the video game. He's done Tron Legacy. He's done Star Trek Into Darkness. I'm sorry. He's done Thor and a bunch of movies. He's got a really neat portfolio. So we went straight to the top with the artwork. So for the tiles that we make and our rule book, the artwork, which I think is important for a sci-fi game, the artwork's going to be amazing. And of course that's not a cheap thing at all. So we have to, that's part of our goal is funding the artwork as well.
Timing, in all things business, timing is everything. And it just so happens that all of a sudden, Polyversal is not the only 6mm sci-fi game out there.
Yeah.
Was it one of those things of, so you put your Kickstarter together and you're all ready to go, and then all of a sudden you discover that, now we've got another company that's running a 6mm sci-fi game,
right.
And then somebody else turns around and says, we're launching in April with another 6mm sci-fi game. Now, given the fact that both of these are the sci-fi games,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking Age of Tyrants and Horizon Wars,
Right.
are systems,
Mm-hmm.
So they're integrated systems. Is it a case of do you look at them as competition or opportunity?
The opportunity, absolutely. I'm excited about them. I mean, I backed Age of Tyrants. I wish John and them the best, John Robertson. And we actually reached out to John. We knew that we had Kickstarters at the same time. And see, theirs ends pretty soon from the time of this recording. They end I think the 15th or 14th. I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
something like that.
We go another 30 days at that point. So, imagine us launching a 30-day Kickstarter after they ended, and nobody would say a thing. And we've got a 60-day project that spans plenty of time for, I would say, would-be backers. Hopefully, that's you as listeners that there's another couple paychecks in there, and understand that. There's a lot of options for you to support, but the more 6 mil, the better, in our opinion. And what's neat about Polyversal is it's compatible with both of those new projects coming up. So Age of Tyrants, all of those models, if you're supporting Age of Tyrants, great. Support Polyversal and you can use them in our game too. So it's win-win. I mean, if you go get some neat miniatures you like out of Age of Tyrants, play their game. I mean, I'm all for that. It's a more established universe that's been there for a while with a bigger history than we have, and so I think that's a big draw. Totally great, totally cool. I think the more the better. The more models out there, the better. Because for Polyversal fans, you've got more options. You've got more to choose from. You can buy some neat walkers or tanks or whatever you want from the guys at Age of Tyrants, and like I said, make a combatant tile for those things in Polyversal, and you can try it out in our rules system. So again, it's opportunity for sure. In fact, John Robertson is backing our project as well, and we've had a lot of good positive exchanges by messages. So there's not this air of competition. I think a lot of people think, well, we're taking away from them or something like that, or they're taking away from us. It's not like that at all. This industry is too small to have any kind of ill intent. And in fact, one of my updates, I gave a link to people backing Polyversal. I gave a link to Age of Tyrants and said, if you haven't seen it yet, go back them as well. It's 6mm. It's a cool looking game. And if you're interested in our game, you'd probably be interested in theirs. So I think that kind of goodwill out there is a good thing for everybody. And like I said, I want to see both projects succeed, and I think that's the general attitude of people. They want to see them both succeed. There's some that had some odd comments about that, but I'll be honest, it's hard not to compete. If you're running a 2-month campaign, which we are, in order to have time to space out previews and have a larger goal, 2 months, that's 1/6 of a year. And it's very difficult to pick a good time that you're not competing with something. I mean, there's always going to be something out there that you're competing with. I think Kickstarter right now, the last I checked, it had over 500 active games projects. And I think that's just in tabletop games. So I could be wrong on that number, but there's a lot, to say the least. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely an opportunity.
Moving on to the future, let's assume that Polyversal is going to get funded, which we all want to happen. Mm-hmm. Me especially, because I've got an awful lot of 6 mil. And what do you see coming next for the company?
Well, assuming Polyversal goes well, we'll be working on that heavily to get the application up and running, to get the game out. That's a big priority. And then we may even do a few expansions for Polyversal, which would basically entail additional box sets with some miniatures and some tiles that we create to further expose people who want to add a little bit to the game and want to go through, and get the tiles that we print that are die cut and professionally printed and so forth. So we'll probably have a few small expansions for Polyversal, assuming that does okay. And from there, we're also working on a Spearpoint Napoleonics game. So that's a kind of a re-theme into Napoleonic Wars. Fun little card game. I think it'll work well. And I've actually got some help from an external designer on that one who's more familiar with that genre. Because I'm more of a World War II guy. But same system. And so we're working on that. And then we've got another design we're working on, which is World War II. It's a board and war game called War Patrol. And it's a submarine game set in the Pacific. And there's some cool sub games out there. This one's got its unique characteristics that I think people really like. Basically, as a player, you're going to control a submarine, and you're going to manage that sub in a cross-section form on your map, and you run a full patrol, a 30-day campaign essentially on the board, where you can do, you're hunting for Imperial Japanese vessels and in the Java Sea. So that's a neat little game. It's more of the medium complexity game than like a Spearpoint game or anything like that. But it's definitely a nice, another different project to work on. It's neat. It's by an external designer as well, and I've been doing the development on it. It's Jeff Daughtry, and he's worked pretty hard on it for a number of years. So we're working on that, and then I don't know from there. We'll see. We'll see where we go. I'm thinking maybe a D-Day version of Spearpoint, which would be pretty cool. Spearpoint 1944. Move into a new year and do a nice D-Day campaign, with the terrain and everything. And again, tying back to inspiration from my uncle. That would be a neat, way to work on a game that's right up my interest alley. So there's a lot of different ideas out there. I think that my main priority right now is Polyversal. One other thing I want to mention with Polyversal is the campaign is also for terrain. We actually have some amazing skyscraper terrain that we're working on from the Phalanx Consortium. They make some cool stuff. They're doing the U.S. version of Skirmish Sanguine, which is a New Zealand game.
Yes.
Yeah.
And know that well.
They've printed stuff here for them, I believe, and they work with Colin and those guys in New Zealand. And so that's a really neat little company, and we're helping them. They're helping us because the terrain is right up the kind of futuristic near-Earth cityscape that we're going for. I've used terrain that I detailed in the different videos that preview Polyversal, and that's been a lot of fun to work on. But Phalanx, they've got 5 buildings. We're actually working on a few. They're working on a few add-on buildings right now to add into the Kickstarter, which will be a little bit smaller. We've gotten some feedback that those skyscrapers are just massive, and they can't, if people can't buy them all, they don't want to buy any because it would be a centerpiece type, terrain piece. So we're working on a few smaller pieces with Phalanx, and I wanted to mention them because we talked about all of our other manufacturers, and I didn't get to mention the terrain guys. So there's a lot going on in that Kickstarter. Hopefully we can make it.
Yeah, those buildings look really cool. What
are they made of? It's a cast foam resin. It's a really neat process that he takes a model in a CAD program in 3D, prints it out in 3D, so 3D printed, to create a master mold, and it may be in multiple parts, usually 1 or 2 parts. And then the mold, the guy who's doing his production takes that master, creates a mold, and fills it with this dense foam resin that sets up very hard, and it can get an incredible amount of detail, actually. It looks very good. And you end up with buildings that are 1 or 2 pieces, very lightweight, which helps us with shipping. And they're tall. I mean, they're 3/4 scale, so not 1-for-1 for 6 mil, but they're very close. And we're talking buildings that are multi-story. I don't know what the conversion is in my head, but a couple of them are 2 feet tall. So you're talking massive stuff on the table. It looks very good with, if you're trying to create a city in a cityscape scene. It just really makes it pop because it looks big. And then to see those, flyers going through the skyscrapers and the tanks on the ground, it's just a neat setting. So yeah, excited about that too.
They are very nice buildings, I've got to say. I just say huge.
Yes.
It sounds like it's been, although massive amounts of hard work, Polyversal's been a really interesting project, to get your teeth into.
Oh yeah.
And obviously, as you say, after recording this, you've got 45 days left to go.
Right.
Actually, one question I meant to ask, which I didn't catch up before was, I'd say it's unusual with the fact that actually having a project that runs over such a length of time. An awful lot of Kickstarters are 20, 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are with a 60-day Kickstarter.
Right.
What was the thinking behind going that? Because obviously, we talked about the Kickstarter lull and this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, one of the issues is going to be keeping focus, keeping interest,
right,
and trying to generate new stuff over the space of 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
How did you arrive at this? Why did you decide to go longer rather than shorter?
Well, partially because of our larger funding goal. So I know that there's more time for people to see it visibly, because part of it is when you launch press releases and so forth. I'll give you one example. Board Game Geek has a crowdfunding roundup thread, and it was just the timing of that thread. The way it came through is our project wasn't covered for 2 weeks after launch. Essentially, it was just posted the other day, and so that's if we were doing a 30-day campaign, we're halfway into it. So part of it is knowing how it takes a bit of time for the various news sites to pick you up. The extra time helps with that, so that you're not missed when you have important updates or whatever. It's incredibly exhausting to run a campaign on Kickstarter. I've run several, and this is definitely the most intense so far as work and responding to questions and so forth. That takes a lot of time. I think in a compressed campaign, that amount of work just increases exponentially, because people have less time to figure out what they want to do, and less time to digest all of the information. And in our case, we made a few adjustments. We would have less time to make those adjustments and get it where potential backers want it to be, which is clear, better visually. Okay, so people want a particular preview, we're going to work on that. So, but it takes time to put that together. It takes time to make these videos. And some of the videos and stuff we're creating, like Ken's walkthrough that we're about to release on designing a unit, we hadn't planned to put that up. We're going to go ahead and do it because people are asking, well, how does this work? So it gives us time to respond to those requests and do so where we can do a good job with the response. We don't just throw something together. And part of the 60 days also was we promised fans back before we even knew about the Age of Tyrants launch in January. We promised fans a January launch. And I wasn't going to back down on that because we'd already said we're going to do it, and I wanted to follow through with that. So we launched it in January, and it was originally going to be a shorter campaign, but Age of Tyrants running made me think, well, what we mentioned before with the overlap, well, why don't we give ourselves a bit more overlap so that people who want to back both have a bit more time to, if it's a funding thing, another couple paychecks to figure out if they want to pledge for both or not. But I think it would be worse had we done a 30-day campaign starting in January with very little overlap with the other project that's going on. So it's, a lot of different dynamics going on there. But mostly it's having run Kickstarter campaigns. I know how much work it is. And, having the time to respond to questions and answers and to give those answers thoroughly. So that's what we're trying to do.
Byron, you've been far too sensible about this.
I think that's a good thing in the case of Kickstarter. Yeah, absolutely. Trying to think of everything, and of course you can't. You can't do that before we launch, and then. So one thing I will say we're working on too is one of the common comments was, well, these models in our base set just aren't visually cohesive. Well, part of that is we're using images from 5 different manufacturers. So if you look at their websites, we get permission to pull those model images from there, and then we present them in what's in the box, and it looks like a hodgepodge. And I agree. But one thing we're working on, which may be up by the time this is posted, is I've employed Ken, and he's willing and doing this. He's actually painting 2 fully painted factions.
Oh, that explains some of his tweets.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's working on that now, and that will replace the image of what's in the box to show that even though they are from different manufacturers, they actually look well together when you paint them together.
Yeah.
So I think we're, responding to that feedback as well. One other point on the models from multiple makers. Some people have kind of a preconceived notion of how something will perform in a game based on the game they've played with it in. So if it's a particular model, a Janus Walker from Hawk, it's a Scout Walker in the Dropstone Commander game. But in our game, it's a little bit heavier Walker because it's 10 millimeter or 6 mil. The way it works in our game will be a little bit more powerful. So as far as cohesion of units, you really got to see how these tiles work together and how the stats are before you really understand that they do work together. So they do. And so visually, we're trying to work on the visual part of that. As far as gameplay, the models we've got in the basic game support our scenarios directly, and I think they work really well.
Good stuff. Well, Byron, it's been really interesting to talk to you, and especially to get a lot of information from not only what you're doing at the moment, but coming through the history of what you've done and picking up on all that. With just the way that everything works and the way that Kickstarter works, and thank you for coming on the show and sharing your insights with that.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we wish you all the very best with with Polyversal. As we've talked about it already a couple of times on the show, and we think it's a really interesting system. Yeah, and as you say, it's doing something different, and it's allowing you to play a different game with what you've got, which is a really exciting concept. And so, we wish you all the very best with Polyversal over the next, I suppose, 6 weeks from the time we're recording this. We really hope that the next time we talk, we're talking about a successfully backed game, and be able to get out there and review it in its entirety. I
hope so. And definitely appreciate you guys having me on the show and backing the project as well, and all the news posts and tweets. It's been great. And definitely appreciate the support.
I haven't blogged yet. Hang on.
That's been great. It's been great to have you on.
Okay.
It's been good. Thank you very much for your time.
The best of luck.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Thank you all very much.
Fancy a chat? Join us as we discuss wargaming at the Meeples and Miniatures Round Table. To quote Julie Andrews, let's start at the very beginning, because it is indeed a good place to start. So in no particular order. Except the list we've got in front of us.
Okay.
The first question is from our good friend Seeger. And, what is it? What do you believe would be a good way to raise awareness of wargamers for the less mainstream miniatures or sets of rules? Well, considering one of the questions on our last mailbag, I think the first thing is, listen to the show!
That good.
Clearly.
Yeah.
We're doing our best.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because obviously, if you're a small firm, you don't have much budget to actually get out, and it's all word of mouth. But I think, for me, there's the two things that attract me to a game is if it's easy to buy. I don't want to be faffing around like I used to 20 years ago, hunting through different manufacturers, trying to work out what pack of figures I need to do, what type of army. So something that says, in this box is everything you need for this army, or this add-on, or whatever. So make it easy to buy, and then try and get it out to clubs. Approach clubs, offer to do demos if you can, or get people in the club involved in demoing stuff for you. The more people see stuff being played at clubs, the more chance they're going to buy it. That's what I think.
Plug it, Facebook it, write about it, talk to us about it, talk to the magazines about it. In short, get yourself a good publicist.
Yeah.
Because it works.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to publicise stuff, which, let's face it, quite a lot of people who produce really nice miniatures don't have the first clue about how to plug their product, find someone who does.
Yeah.
It'll pay for itself.
Yeah, because, social media is a massive leveler these days, isn't there?
Oh, very much so.
It doesn't matter who you are.
Dear Lord, yes.
So...
You've only got to look at the people who are social media savvy. Annie immediately springs to mind.
Yeah.
As somebody who does the whole social... Now, admittedly, potentially social media is a huge time sink. Having said that, at the same time, if you turn around and go, I actually treat it, well, actually, when I'm doing social media, that's actually part of my marketing budget.
Yeah. And it's not like a massive... it is a massive time sink, but it's in small chunks. So it's not as if... Yeah, you don't sort of turn around and go, right, I'm going to spend the next 3 hours doing my social media. Or maybe people do.
Some people do.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, my nephew works for Sky, and his job is doing social media for the sports channel. But yeah, for normal firms, you can do it on your phone. It takes seconds to reply to a tweet, or just put a message up there, or link Facebook to Twitter and Instagram. Basically.
In fact, that's actually a really good tip. If you've got a Blogspot blog or a WordPress blog, there are plugins that will make sure it magically appears on Facebook. On your Facebook page. You do have a Facebook page, don't you?
Well,
and on Twitter.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is what the club does. It's what I do. I know it's what Neil does. And it's what a lot of the more media-savvy gaming companies do.
Yeah.
And you get a heck of a profile by being active on social media these days, because there is... for some reason, all the wargamers who blog seem, with a few exceptions, have gravitated to Blogspot. There is a really huge sort of cross-pollinating culture of people who are on each other's blog rolls, and they're almost all on Blogspot. And you can guarantee that if you post something that interests someone on Blogspot, it will get picked up and linked and commented on, especially if your posts also go on Facebook and Twitter. It's not rocket science. It really is very easy to do.
So what you're intimating, Mr. Whitaker, is that those of us who are still on WordPress need to gravitate somewhere else.
No. I point out that both the club and the show website are on WordPress because it's actually easier to manage.
It is.
But there just appears to have been historically, Wargamers seem to be on Blogger, because it's from a point of view of, if you don't mind a blog that looks like one of about 8 standard brands that Google provides you with, it's dead easy to set up. And the social linking bits of it are very handy, assuming Google don't eventually decide to take them away. And you get, a lot of the people I know and who follow me start out through Blogspot before they ever end up on Facebook or Twitter. And I start mentioning Meeples, and I suspect some of them start following Meeples.
Yeah, it all goes round. It was in the old days when you used to put an advert into a magazine. Okay, one person would read that magazine, maybe 2. Now, if you put something on Facebook, it gets shared. So whoever shares it, their audience see it, and then it gets shared again. So you've got this constant churn of things getting shared and mini viral in our little community. So word goes around. it is a fine line, because you do see some people who get it slightly wrong and just flood loads and loads of stuff, and they flood the same tweet or the same message over and over again. And that gets a little bit annoying. I
could name names, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
But I don't know why it does it. I don't know why.
Not you.
No. Well, this is firms who basically tweet the same thing on like a weekly basis.
Yeah.
There are a couple of people who I have stopped following on Twitter because their plugs for certain of their things are the same thing every other day.
Yeah.
For the same product.
Yeah, and it's great to plug your stuff, but you also need then to use the other side of social media, which is corresponding with the people who comment on it. So don't just chuck a tweet out there and forget about it. If somebody replies, favourite it or whatever, just do the back and forth.
And the other one, which I know a few people who are guilty of, is be yourself.
Yeah.
I know someone who is actually not a wargamer and not even remotely connected with the wargames industry, who just happens to be local to me, who I follow on Twitter and Facebook, who writes most of their tweets and Facebook posts like press releases in the third person. In fact, I have a nasty feeling they're written by their agent. And it really grates. Don't do it.
No.
Talk about yourselves.
And also, got to say, the Wargames website, which you haven't mentioned for a while, they're very good, because whenever you put a news article into there, they publish it on there, it goes onto Twitter, it goes into Google+, and I think it also goes into their Facebook.
Yeah, there's several sites that sort of aggregate blogs, and you can feed news to. Do it.
Yeah.
So I think the short answer to Sigur's question is social media.
Yeah, and also quite good products.
Yeah. As you say, it is more easy than it ever has been to get your name known, but it does take a bit of work. Interestingly, the other issue, I think, is that actually it also depends on gaming culture, which kind of feeds nicely into the next question.
Yeah, I was going to make a small point before you do.
Go on.
You want an excellent example of how something can be publicised, be really big, generate a massive buzz, and be just one person? All Quiet on the Martian Front.
Yeah. Well, there's two of them.
Only one who appears to be doing most of the talking. But it can be done if you are good enough at what you do. But there's a sideline to that, which we'll probably come and discuss in another question, which is not screwing it up.
Another brilliant example of using social media, Rich Clark from the Lardies.
Amen.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Every Tuesday, you're getting a running commentary on his latest battle report with pictures, little bits of text, funny little stuff, but pictures. This is the battle we're doing today. Get people interested. You know damn well that after watching Rich's Twitter feed, that when Sharp Practice 2 comes out, it's going to fly out because everyone's going, oh, he's doing American Civil War now. Oh, last week he's doing Napoleonic. Oh, is this American War of Independence he's doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Clever things like that.
And everything looks really pretty.
Yeah.
That's my line.
Yeah, I know it's your line, but actually it does look great. It does. Doesn't it?
Rich doesn't put out bad tables. The other thing, and while we're on the subject of posting regularly like that, is something we did with the show, is if you watch in the run-up to Herod Wargames show, there was a new post on Facebook nearly every day, and it wasn't the same post.
Yeah.
And we actually had a plan for the last 3 weeks, pretty much, of what we were going to post every day. And you'd also find that we shared that post with different Facebook groups, depending on which, the Saga tournament one, and the fact that GB was sponsoring us, goes to the Saga group and the Dark Ages group and probably the Duck Spirit group. The general Wargaming's the how to get here and where you can do your advanced bookings go to all the Wargames Club groups. But there's actually a key takeaway there, which is it's worth the effort to pick your target, don't scattershot. And it's also really worth tailoring the post to the group you're posting to.
Yeah.
Because then they won't feel like you're just pointing a blunderbuss in the general direction and hoping you hit something, which may work for spammers, but isn't a good way of winning yourself friends.
There we go. I think we covered that one quite nicely.
Okay. So, second question, something I was just leading into before Mike came back and said, before we go. David Blood, who says, I'm an American. I'm fascinated by the differences in gaming culture between the USA and the UK. For example, gaming at a game store versus gaming clubs, or the differences between something like Gen Con and Salute. I know at least some of you have gamed in both countries. What are the differences and which do you prefer? Interesting. I was about to say, again, regarding the less mainstream miniature set of rules, I think it's a lot easier to break into, and this is a sweeping generalisation which I am quite open to be to be shot down on, but I think it's probably easier to break into the European market than the American one. And that's partially down to this difference between clubs surrounding gaming stores and clubs surrounding British and European gaming clubs. One of the things behind that is that it seems, at least to me, and actually this is the experience I've seen as well in clubs in the UK that are around stores, and that is they gravitate to the games that the stores sell. Obviously, depending on the size of the store and what their stock level is, which is one reason I think why you end up in situations that, the likes of Games Workshop, Privateer Press, Battlefront, Infinity, and several others do as well as they do, because it's not just about the game. It's about who I can play that game with. And if you're in a situation that, for example, let's look at the assumption, and I think it is a sweeping assumption, that most gaming is centred around game stores in the US, which actually I don't think is quite the case, but there we go. It's what games are on sale, and a lot of the time, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What games are people playing, therefore what sells well? What sells well comes down to what games people play.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, I don't know if I agree with game stores being the sort of main areas of gaming in the US.
Well, as I say, this is what I thought it was. It's a bit of a sweeping generalisation, and I don't think it's entirely true. Certainly, that was something that was intimated in the question, and I don't think it is as true as some people may think it is.
I think it's probably true in big urban areas, like big cities.
In either direction, actually, because there's certainly gaming at stores here.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, there is.
Yes, I mean...
mentioning no names first on games.
Oh, it's completely separate. You've got a social club and you've got a store attached.
But it's that...
it's completely separate, honest gov. Yeah.
Our friendly local gaming store, shout out to Trevor at the Rift, used to do Flames of War nights on Fridays.
I mean, yeah, if I had a gaming store, then I would have tables in there for people to use, and I'd be making sure that they were playing the games that I was selling. And
yeah, I know that Ruben with PE2 Collectibles has said exactly that if he ever gets that rich or brave.
Yeah, and like you say, it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy because obviously with Firestorm where I play, it's so damn easy just to walk in there and go, oh, what's this? And if there's sort of 5 or 6 gamers and we all sort of wandering together and we all pick up the same thing, and somebody says, I don't see this, then we'll usually take a punt on it. So somebody will buy it and we'll try it out. And if we like it, then other people will buy it. So yeah, that does happen. The cultural thing is really interesting because I think there's a lot of gamers, possibly in sort of rural areas of the US, who play a lot of solo games. And their chance to play games happens at the big events, like the Gen Cons. And maybe that's why Gen Cons, Adepticon, whatever else is out there, become these big 3 or 4 day events where you just go and play games. Whereas in the UK, we go and buy. And have we got anything that's of a similar type of format to a US big convention.
UK Games Expo.
Yeah, that's probably the only one, isn't it?
But that's, as I think somebody said not so long ago when we were discussing it, that's not really a Wargames convention.
No, but it's a gaming convention, isn't it? So trying to sort of lump the two together.
I mean, I would like very much to add some features of a US gaming convention, or for that matter, a UK science fiction convention, namely panels and the like, to Hereward. We have the space to do it.
You have to do it for more than one day, don't you? I think that's the thing with these big conventions is
otherwise people don't feel, by the time you've done a couple of games on the show floor, it's time to go home.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see a US style event in the UK. I'd love to have, like 3 or 4 days of playing different games and getting out there and be able to have, lots of in-depth demos and play participation games for more than one day. Literally over a long weekend. But I don't know if there's a market for it.
Well, there's one for you folks to write in and tell us. What would you like to see at a UK war game show?
And, a lot of it, I think, probably is because we probably play more in a social atmosphere, with the gaming clubs that we've got, than they probably do in the US. So maybe it is that. Maybe, if we're all going to our gaming clubs once a week, or maybe twice a week, and then we turn down to our loved ones and said, I'm going to go away for 4 days. I mean, actually, would there be an appetite to do it? And I'm probably backtracking here. Even though I say it'd be great to see a 4-day event, would I actually go for 4 days? I'd probably get bored stupid after 2 days.
I'm going to a Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday science fiction convention this weekend. And there is certainly a market for those in the UK. There's one on roughly, I would think, every third weekend, or maybe even every second weekend in the UK, if you know where to look.
I regularly, up until very recently, used to attend Manacon every year.
That was the board games con,
which is a
it?
board games con based at Leicester Uni, and that ran Friday lunchtime to Monday lunchtime, and I regularly used to go Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and that is essentially 2.5 days of floor-to-ceiling solid plain board games. Admittedly, I probably wouldn't want to go to massive amounts of those, but having said, I mean, in some ways, you could do that at something like the UK Games Expo as well, and I know that people do. Yeah. As I say, the Expo is probably the biggest thing we've got close to something like, I would suggest something like Gen Con. Where you do have absolutely everything going on. But as you say, obviously, I think actually, partially, it's an accident of geography. Yeah, and simply the fact that considering geography, population density, we have and this is something I've discussed before. We have a lot more gamers per square mile, shall we say, and not long distances to travel to get to any gaming club. I would suggest that for most people, you would only have to drive half an hour, and you could get to several different gaming clubs.
Yeah. For
the majority of the UK. Obviously not every location, because there are still places that are out in the wilds. But, especially in the majority of the UK, it is relatively easy to get to a local gaming club. That may not necessarily be the case when you've got a country the size of the US.
Do you think that's also got something to do with the reasons why gaming is so popular in the UK as opposed to what we see in the US? We've got an awful lot of game designers based in the UK. We've got an awful lot of figure manufacturers, gaming manufacturers, again, based here in the UK. So it's almost like people say that the UK is the sort of heart of wargame, isn't it? Whereas over in the US, you look at how many wargames designers who are based there and how many manufacturers who are based there, with the population difference between the UK and the US. Do you think maybe that's got something to do with it? Maybe they're just, it's just not as popular a hobby as it is over here.
It's possible.
So therefore, even though you might live in a large urban area in the US, if there's only a handful of gamers who don't actually meet, then there's no real chance to actually sort of get together and play, and there probably isn't the economic necessity to actually run a war games shop if you haven't got the density of people to actually, come to the shop and buy things.
And maybe this is why, actually, I would go as far as to suggest board games are bigger than the States.
Yeah.
Than war games. You only have to look at some of the likes of Fantasy Flight Games, for example. Hugely massive American producer, hugely popular, and they're doing these days. They're doing an awful lot of what we would term hybrid games, but it's almost like that sort of thing seems to be an awful lot more popular than what we would deem to be one of the war game. Having said that, you then get companies like Spartan, for example, who do hugely well in the States. But again, that's based around ranges and systems that sell in shops.
But is that actually about it being is the US thing therefore about board games or about open the box and play? Because Halo Fleet Battles, Planetfall, Armada are, if you want them to be, pretty much open the box and play.
Yeah, Spartan are very good now at the way they package up their stuff.
Yes.
Like you say, and it probably comes back to our first question, it's making things easier to buy, easier to stock.
Mm.
Yeah. So, backtracking a bit, because I realised that I missed an opportunity here. Going back to the concept of the more American-style show, how does this sound? A whole day of tabletop gaming in all its beautiful varieties. 3 floors of workshops, demonstrations, taster sessions, regular games, a bring and buy stall, beer and good company, role-playing games, board games and war games all catered for. Come and play something new or return to something old.
What website was that from?
That's from HateCon1.
Okay.
HateCon. HateCon 1 is the Hackney area tabletop enthusiasts on the 27th of February. I mention this because my good friend John Austin, who you guys I think ran into at the Peterborough show, demoing Relics, went down there to just basically say hi and talk to them a bit, and happened to name drop that he mentioned me, which apparently cued a lot of of unmanly squealing and, oh my God, one of the presenters of Meeples. That's our favourite podcast.
Oh, yes, I remember the email. Yes.
By the by, they're running a show. And shout out, guys, because I'm sure there'll be even more unmanly squealing as a result. It looks really good and it really fits in with the topic of this conversation. I strongly recommend folks go along.
And there will be a link in the show notes.
I would be interested in speaking to them afterwards and finding out how it went.
Me too.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
In fact, if I can, I'm currently double booked that day, but it's really going to depend on transport and schedule, I might try and get down. That's probably just caused more unmanly squealing, hasn't it?
Wait till they meet you, Mike. They'll be so disappointed.
That'd be terrible, won't it?
Indeed. Why do we present a podcast? Because we have faces made for radio.
we have faces for radio, folks.
I'm sorry, Mike. You look nothing like your avatar.
In fact, once.
Yeah, in fact, I have a whole body made for radio, but let's not go there. Oh, I did. Sorry.
Yeah. So, if any American listeners are listening and are turning around going, guys, you're talking bullshit. So,
please tell us.
Yeah, because
tell us. Come on the show and tell us. Even I mean, there's an invitation.
Yeah, because I've never played in America. I've always fancied the idea of it. So, I think probably for all of us, we're speaking very generally from what we understand is the culture.
I'm off to Seattle next month, and I'm kind of hoping to squeeze a game in with one of our regulars if he's got time.
Even better.
Hey, Gary.
So, take your little microphone and record it. Get us a bit of audio.
Well, a bit of readers' interviews. Listeners' interviews. Oh, you never know. We might just.
Yes.
Shall we move on?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
So, from Snowcat, probably not his real name, can you think of something that the miniatures gaming hobby could really benefit from that currently doesn't exist or is underserved.
Just want to say hello, Snowcat. One of our original Antipodean listeners.
Cool.
He's been with the show a long time.
I'm going to go back to that somewhat brief and acrimonious thread from last time and say 3D printing. Which I think we covered to death.
Yeah. I think I'll probably say better training in social skills with some people. Not on this podcast.
Controversial.
Just some people I sort of bump into. Really? This is MySpace. It's a tricky question, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Currently, something miniature gaming could benefit from that currently doesn't exist.
A sense of proportion amongst Kickstarter backers.
Oh, there we go. And he's off.
Takes the lead at the first bend.
Some would argue I can have deodorant at a Wargames convention, but there we go.
Yeah, it's... Sorry, Snowcat. If
Sorry.
it sounded flippant, it's a really tricky question.
It's
a difficult question.
It's a great question. It's like, yeah, okay, I think we're probably the wrong people to ask that one. It's a great question.
I personally like to see the first celebrity wargamer come out of the closet and stand proud and say, yes, I am a wargamer.
What, you mean it wasn't Derek Guyler, you mean?
Or Robin Williams.
Well, yeah, other than those two.
Other than those two.
Or Edward Woodward.
Edward Woodward. Yes, indeed. Of course, there was a common thread amongst these people.
Well, they're all dead.
They're all dead, Jim. Yes.
Isn't there a guy dead?
I'm given to understand...
I don't even know he'd been ill.
I'm also given to understand that a certain well-known BBC presenter is actually a Wargames Rules author in another life.
Yes, you would understand that correctly. However, I don't believe that he normally likes to have his name mentioned in that. So
we won't.
We won't, but we know who he is, and I'm sure he does as well. He's actually been in battle games. But
and if he wants to come and talk to us, we'll do an interview.
Oh, that would be cool. Oh, that would be so cool.
I think Neil just had a fanboy moment.
Oh, I did. Definitely. Oh, I did. Yeah.
I've got no idea who you're talking about. Next question.
Next question. Oh,
okay.
It's our mate Ken.
Yeah, one from Ken Whitehurst. XLS and Gollum Arcana tried. How long till the first truly popular computer-aided minigame? What will it take?
Interesting
Shall I make
one.
A controversial answer to that?
You can if you want.
Yeah.
Have you ever having tried gaming with the rules on an iPad and discovering that I much prefer a print copy of the rules, probably never.
I think it'll happen, and I think it'll happen soon. But it's going to need something that's going to be usable on the mobile app, and it needs to have interaction between the game and the app. And if somebody can do that, then I think it'll work. You know, what they were doing with XLS was quite interesting. I didn't really try the Gollum Arcana, so I don't really know how that worked. But you need to have some way of tying the two, and it's got to be easy to use.
Yeah. I think,
and it's got to give value.
Indeed. I mean, where XLS went wrong, and I can't now. You know, if you listen back, you know how much myself and Dave Luff liked XLS and got into XLS, and it is dead. It is officially, the website is now offline. XLS website that they said, oh yeah, we've got this for 10 years and blah, 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 blah. It's gone. It's deader than a dead thing. Interesting question, considering this was asked several months ago. And was it only just, I think it was either early this week or back end of last week, the company whose name immediately escapes me that produced Gollum Arcana turned around and said, that's it guys, after 2 years of production, we are producing the final expansion. Everything's going on sale. The game finishes production and it will be no more after the end of February of this year. So this was written 6 months ago. And now we see that Gollum Arcana has gone the way of XLS. It's died. Now, is part of that to do with, and I was going to say, one of the issues where XLS went wrong, although, to be honest, it's difficult to know how, in some ways, how else they could do it, but the whole DRM thing, the whole fact that, well, okay, in order for this to work, you have to buy our models to get and use them to get into the game. And again, that's how Golem Arcana worked. They had a range of models. You had to use those models to get into the game. And yet at the same time, as Mike said, the problem is, effectively, they both were video games. They could be played as video-only games, couldn't they?
Yeah, quite easily.
Yeah.
The other problem you've got, which sort of ties in with that, I mean, it would be possible, I guess, to produce something of the Exilis flavour, but that was, say, a World War II game, where your game management system was done the same way as Exilis, but your forces, you basically had some means of registering your forces with the app to say, I have a section of British Infantry 1944, standard equipment, dudding. You know, I'm thinking something sort of Flames of War size based at this point, say. But you still have the underlying costs that either you have to contain everything within the app, or you have to keep in fact, you probably do anyway, you have to keep some form of server up and running 24/7 for the life of the game for the app to talk to.
Yeah.
That isn't free.
No. I think...
And if your game takes off, it's even less free.
I think one way that the two could mash up together would be to have a computer-generated campaign system that you basically sign up for. So when you play your war game in the setting, that before you start the game, it basically gives you, you know, this is the layout you need for this particular scenario. This is the forces you've got. These are some stats for the individual units because of their morale or exhaustion or whatever. And then at the end of the game, you plug in what happened. You plug in some key variables, and it generates the next battle, or it gives you some options of what to do.
But again, you're in the position of needing a server to talk to.
Yeah.
I suspect one of the things that killed, and the other thing you need, our third great thing the Romans gave us, what is you need people who are capable of developing it. And then not only that, but it has to not break.
Yeah.
There is even more so than just an ordinary Wargames company's shop website. You cannot have that fall over at 10 to 8 on a club night when two people happen to put in some bunch of weird forces that nobody had thought of before.
Yeah. And the development cost is probably what would kill it. Because, well, you basically need two sets of individual skills. You need, if you're producing a set of rules and models to go with it, then obviously you need all of that manufacturing infrastructure, plus you need a full web development team to do the computer side.
And more to the point, you also need a set of rules which at no point do you need interpretation of.
Yeah.
They have to be absolutely computer-level logic.
Yeah.
And I think I stand by my answer, on top of the reason I originally gave, which is that I don't find having an iPad around a game unless I absolutely have to particularly fun. I think I've just got about 3 more reasons why it's not going to work.
Yeah. I mean, I could see how an app-based or program-based system could enhance a campaign. I'm not sure about how it would. It'd have to be really special to do something in the board game area.
I mean, let's face it, some of the best things that computers do for us are most accurately summed up with Easy Army and its equivalents.
Yeah.
I would no more dream of trying to do a WAB army or a Kings of War army these days without Easy Army than I would trying to fly to the moon. It's just, I don't need the headache, particularly when somebody's done it for me.
Can I point you in the direction of a game that, and I hazard a guess here that maybe neither of you ever heard about this? Have ever you heard of a game called Carnage and Glory?
No.
It's an interesting one. I've seen this played 2 or 3 times. It was a club that always used to run a game of this at the Derby show, when Derby was still held at Derby University. Because what they used to do, this is a Windows program, and they used to run it on a laptop with a projector onto a screen so everybody could see basically the number crunching. This system, has rules for Napoleonic Wars, 7 Years' War, American Civil War, Franco-Prussian War, Wars in the Age of Marlborough, and also English Civil War. Interestingly, basically what it is you have a situation where you identify all your units, you move them around or what have you. What the game does is keep track of casualties, unit morale, and all that side of things. So,
and I assume who's where, and who can see who, and who knows where who is.
Actually, no. As far as I'm aware, that bit is done by the gamer.
Because, I don't know if folks remember, but about 2 years ago, for those of you who follow my blog, I was playing in a Peninsular War campaign run by Gavin from our club, where the actual map movement was handled by something Gavin had written, which sounds not unlike Carnage and Glory, except that it did allow you, basically, your map was a series of settlements joined by roads. And it took you X days to move down a road, etc., etc. And you had an order of battle at the brigade level. The system actually kept track of where all your units were, and interestingly, that was based on the viewpoint of where your general was. So it was possible to lose units very realistically.
I think it's a case of you have to keep telling the game, where units are and as far as things like, what sort of thing they occupy or what have you. So there was a level of interaction there, but when it boils down to keeping track of, all the number crunchy stuff and combat, that's controlled by the system. It is a very simulation style game. That's what it's aimed at. It's aimed at number crunching for simulation. But that is something that's out there and available, which is something that's very different and actually, as I say, much more aimed at the less video game generation, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
It is very much a case of popping up with a series of Windows boxes on stuff. It is very old fashioned, for want of a better phrase. And again, it's something myself and Dave have toyed with the idea of using. Whether or not we'll ever, we've got it. Whether or not we'll ever use it or not is another matter entirely.
But it is kind of something that you're not using at the table. You're using it to set up what happens at the table.
Yeah, it's like I was saying about sort of the campaign style, and maybe that's where they all sit. Maybe they will sit outside of the game itself and basically give you a setting or, handle what happens outside. And like you say, Mike, things like Battle Skype and, is it Easy Army you use?
Yeah.
So you've got systems that do that. So we've already got lots and lots of systems that produce armies for us. There's loads of them. I really like the XLS campaign system. I thought that was really good. It's something that you did offline. You basically did whilst you were not playing. I wasn't so keen on the XLS controlling every facet of the game and all you had to do was move some figures around. So maybe you need to look at the strengths of what these apps can do. And maybe the campaign side of things is what they'll start doing. Almost like a Kriegsfield campaign manager. Put in what you're doing in the next half hour with these troops, or what orders you're going to give them, and it works out, and then basically pops up and says, "Hey, you've got a battle. Go off and play it." So maybe it's that.
Who knows?
Interesting thought, though. But I should say, it seems that outside of, for want of a better phrase and something we used before, the meta game, it does seem that at the moment, as a general rule, it falls flat on its face. Maybe that, as I say, it's the clash between the two, isn't it?
Yeah.
Next question.
Whose turn is it?
Can't be mine.
Okay, well, from the Bizzler.
Hello, Gordon.
I think 6mm gaming trumps 28mm for strategy. Why isn't this scale more popular? Is it because 28mm minis are prettier than 6mm? No, it's because we're all blind and can't blade 6mm.
Oh, what a sweeping statement.
6 mil so easier to paint than 28 mil.
6 mil is brilliant and easy to paint.
Yeah, that was a cheap shot, and I probably agree. And I have to say that I am seriously tempted that if I ever decide to do ACW, I will do it in 6 mil.
I think his point is valid. I think
on the grounds that way it's only a matter of dot of blue, dot of grey.
Oh, you say that, but you start. To be honest with you, why it's more popular, it probably is because they're prettier.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just it.
Also, we do appear to be moving towards an era of boutique skirmish games. And you lose your 6 mil figures playing that.
Yeah, but you can play a boutique size game with 6 mil.
And
yeah,
I have to say, if you want to see real prettiness in company level World War II, there's a couple of folks on the Lardies list who play I Ain't Been Shot No in 6 mil, and it looks fantastic.
It's really
sweeping and huge.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Backers have just started releasing their World War II range.
Behind me, Satan.
They're very nice.
But oddly enough, I think there's nothing finer than looking at a big 6 mil battle. But I like 6 mil battles. If it's Napoleonic, I like 6 mil battles played on big bases.
Yeah, yes. I think what you have to do for that is use 15 mil basing and just stick more figures on them. Something that actually gives you a block of troops that looks like a block of troops, not 24 blokes who turned up for a scrap because they felt like it.
The famous Napoleonic battle quote from Mr. Berry himself. A Napoleonic battle that looks like a Napoleonic battle as opposed to half a dozen blokes taking a flag for a walk.
You know,
Indeed.
One thing I did try years and years ago, I did a 6 mil army, but I did it on 100 mil by 50 mil bases.
Oh, I bet that was good. There was the bunch of complete loonies who tried to do Tewkesbury in 6 mil 1-to-1 figure scale.
No, you mean Towton, don't you?
It was Towton, wasn't it? Yes.
They had over 17,000 figures on the table.
Awesome.
It looked brilliant when they were originally deployed, and then it just became, funnily enough, a mass of figures in the middle of the table. Because
that's what Towton was.
But that's what Towton was, yeah, indeed.
Because everyone got lost in the fog.
But yeah, there is this thing that you cannot beat something like 6 mil or some would argue 10 mil for giving that epic scale. Yeah, I mean that's why we game Ancients in 6 mil because I mean I do.
I thought you gamed Ancients in 6 mil because they fit on the Command and Colours hexes.
No, we've been using back a 60 by 30 bases, and interestingly enough, pardon?
I said teasing.
Oh, yeah, okay. But interestingly enough, did you know that quite easily on a back of 60 by 30 base, you can fit 48 Roman legionaries? So, which is exactly
half a cohort.
No, it's 1/10. It's 1/10 of the size of a cohort because cohort's 4.
Sorry, half a century.
Yeah, because it's 480 troops. And you can get 48 miniatures quite nicely onto a 60 by 30 base. And it looks quite packed and stuff. And I've actually, as you say, Michael saying 100 by 50 bases. If you, looking in, I forget where I saw it, but somebody actually did it in, a game, and actually said, okay, here is a cohort 1-to-1 scale in 6 mil.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing you can do is a British line that's actually long enough for its depth. Because let's face it, nothing looks naffer than 12 figures. It's 24 figures, too deep, trying to be a line.
Yeah, but it's still more popular, isn't it? 28 to 6.
As you say, because it looks pretty. I mean, You know, it's the same thing of, interestingly, you look around and say, we prefer the look of playing Chain of Command in 15 mil. Especially when it ideally fits the ground scale. And so you really get a feel of actually the empty battlefield, for want of a better phrase. Whereas, everybody says, or a lot of people, say, oh, it's a 28 mil game. And to be fair, that's what it's been presented as when Richard's played it.
Mm.
It's partly a game. Is this because it's partly media based? And actually, the vast majority of games that you see in the printed, especially in the printed media, are 28mm, because actually 28mm figures look better in photos.
Could be.
And then all of a sudden, you know, I mean, obviously, Mr. Hobbs, not your figures when you look at them in Sword and Spear, of course. They look, they look beautiful.
That's because I didn't paint them.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. Again, it is interesting, isn't it? Where, okay, you look at something like that, where you look at the first edition Sword and Spear, where, again, Mark did all the photography himself of his own collection, which are all 15mm. And then you look at second edition, where you've got an awful lot of 28mm figures in. Completely changes the complexion of the game, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I don't really answer that, but we talked a lot.
Usual then. Next question.
Oh dear. When you reverse the WG of Warlord Games, you get GW. Are Warlord Games becoming the next big worldwide gaming empire? Was it simply because they're all ex-GW employees? Maybe I should get that bit out.
And that's from Paul.
And that's from Paul. Paul who, I wonder? Yes.
Possibly. They've built the company up in a very short period of time, and they're covering a lot of periods, a lot of scales.
And especially with the acquisition of the Wargames factory plastics.
That's stuff to do with Revel as well.
Yeah, with the plastic World War II kits, and it's, the deal they did with the Taglieri, and they're becoming, well, they're a major force, aren't they?
Yeah, and let's be honest, they've probably written the most popular World War II game in the last 5-10 years. It's probably
Would you say Bolt Action is now more popular than Flames of War? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Would you say yes? Yeah,
I think so. What they did with Bolt Action, okay, putting aside the fact that probably none of us here really like the rules that much, I think we've all got respect for what Warlord have done with Bolt Action, because they targeted it at 40k players. Massively targeted, and they reeled them in, and they introduced a whole new bunch of people to World War II gaming, and their range of figures that they've got in 28mm is second to none.
It's good, yes.
And you've got to have a respect for the company that does that, and at the same time as doing that, which is a major, piece of work, they've also got Black Powder, Hail Caesar. They're now doing sci-fi. They brought on other sets of World War II rules. They're doing plastics. Literally from now back to biblical times. Massive investment. Yeah. So if anyone's going to become the historical version of
that said,
Workshop, I think it's them.
They have a way to go.
Yeah.
Thanks to companycheck.com, Games Workshop Limited. Cash at hand, 11.2 mil. Net worth, 26.2 mil. Yes. Warlord Games. Cash at hand, 143k. Net worth, 222k. They've got a bit of a way to go yet.
Yeah, but they've only been going for 4 or 5 years.
8.
Is that long? Really? 8?
That's how long the Warlord Games Limited has existed.
Yeah.
Those, by the way, are 2014 figures, but even so. And I suspect Warlord are quite a bit bigger now, and I suspect Games Workshop have probably continued their downward trend, but I don't think they're anywhere near meeting on a purely financial basis yet. Mind you, they've had enough money to acquire the Wargames factory product line, which was probably not cheap.
Indeed.
They've acquired a lot of stuff. And let's be honest, in our hobby, when you start looking at historical now, people will start talking about, do Warlord do it?
And I have to ask this, because there is this whole inherent evil empire thing with Games Workshop, whatever you believe about them, yeah, there is this whole thing about, Games Workshop, the evil empire, and wherever that came from. Anyway, my question is, actually, is it a bad thing?
No. Here's a question for you. Who do you think was worth more in 2014, Warlord or Mantic?
Ooh. I can imagine what the actual answer is.
Mantic by a factor of 3.
That is interesting.
Isn't it? So, yes, but maybe, but...
That is very interesting.
Admittedly, I'm going, and they've been going for 7 years. I had to double check I had the right Mantic, but they do appear to have Ronnie Renton on the board of directors, which is a pretty good clue. And they went up nearly 30%, 50% profits, 25% in assets that year, and Warlord were actually shooting up, nearly tripled their cash in hand and 35% up their assets in 2014. So they're both growing, which Games Workshop are not. But definitely. So yeah, if you're going to ask that question, don't forget Mantic.
They did kind of spring in the back of my mind because they are growing massively now.
They sprung in the back of mine, which is why I went to
quite
check.
Yes. Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how Spartan match up against them, to be honest. But if you can
typing in the background,
I was going to say if you can find them, that would be interesting to see how they match up.
Not disclosed.
But isn't it interesting that there are 3 very large gaming companies all happening, actually 4, and they're all based in the UK. Okay, so, and the only other one is obviously Battlefront. They're based in New Zealand, aren't they?
That's Spartan Games in Shepton Mallet. They said they're currently not listing, but
yeah, it is interesting, isn't it?
Well, we know Spartan must be doing relatively well, given if they've got back-rolling Halo.
Oh, quite, yes.
But interesting question.
It is, because I hear in the back of my mind the conversations I've had with a couple of people about, for want of a better phrase, the hobby becoming much more androgynous and rules becoming...
samey?
Yes. Again, the word androgynous, becoming lowest common denominator, as opposed to different and distinctive, which I think is again, I suppose, going back to our original question from Sega. That is why, although you have these big game companies, there are always going to be room and space for the little guys. And we refer back to, I think, a question from the last show. And the statement I made about the fact that, we turn around and go, arguably 2 of the best games to be produced in the last 3 years are from small independent publishers and not from the big games companies. Okay, they're not necessarily the game that everybody's playing. However, from a review point of view and a mechanics point of view, and admittedly this is still our own opinion, but they're 2 of the best out there.
We are in a very good place.
We are. Just as a final little amusing point to throw into the argument, Wayland Games. Not much in the way of cash and net worth in 2014, but they did have over £1 million in assets, which is the same as Mantic.
Yeah, haven't Wayland got that great big gaming centre down south?
Warehouse full of stuff.
And yes, and a big game centre.
Yeah.
Yes, I think some of their assets.
Yes. But interesting. Very interesting question.
Yes. Okay, we've got time for one final question.
And it's a doozy.
It's a doozy, which is probably where, perhaps actually he's almost worth a round table all on its own, and we have avoided doing it on a couple of occasions. And
guess what?
It's back to our old mate Sega. Question. What do you think of Kickstarter's impact on miniature wargaming?
Warning, rant alert. Warning, rant alert. Warning, rant alert.
Go on, Mike, I'm just going to go mute. 5 minutes while you get this off your chest.
Yeah. What's the phrase? I think I'm going to go and make a coffee.
Right. Well, if you listened to last 2 weeks' episode, you will no doubt have heard my little chat with Wayne Bollins from Wargames Illustrated, which actually sums up my opinion quite well, which is that I think that it's been very good for the hobby in general. I am firmly convinced that there are a lot of little projects, for example, the Stag Riders and Warbears Kickstarter, a number of other Kickstarters, the Adventures in Sensible Shoes. I'm sure we've pulled out quite a few over the course of time where the project owners have set their target fairly low simply because they need the money. And they have basically arranged for a Kickstarter to allow people to, for the purpose for which I think the Kickstarter folks intended Kickstarter, namely to allow a small person or group of people to go, I need X grand to make this happen. I can't do it unless I have a reasonable guarantee of that income from enough interested parties that I can fund the recording of my album, taking the necessary time off to write my book, paying someone to make the greens, working out all the advanced casting, etc., 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 for my project. And for that, I think Kickstarter has been absolutely brilliant. Now, it's perfectly clear from anybody who's been watching Kickstarter over the last couple of years that if you look at something like Mantic, Reaper Bones, and a number of others, Cool Beanie or Not is another one that springs to mind, the companies behind them have probably got the funds to do what they want, but potentially over a longer time scale than they might otherwise do. Although having seen the way some of those Kickstarters overrun, I'm not so sure of that. My whole issue with Kickstarters is that the likes of Mantic, Reaper Bones, Cool Me or Not appear to have set expectation levels among some members of the hobby that are unrealistic for other Kickstarters. And I will give you an absolutely brilliant example I heard the other day. And you have to excuse me while I find the link just to make sure I don't get this wrong. Listening to the guys on 4 Foot Snake, which is the Kings of War podcast I've been listening to a bit, run by some guys from the Rule Committee. They were talking to Chris Nichols, who runs Macrocosm Miniatures. Now, I don't know if anybody's come across them, but they're producing, as well as some alien sci-fi stuff, he has a thing for short fantasy races, particularly dwarves and hobbits, and they are very, very similar in feel to some of the early Games Workshop minis. He's doing nice things like army packs for Kings of War and the like, as well as his own rule set. Now, I am given to understand that he acquired some of these figure ranges from somebody else who wasn't doing anything with them, and as such, they came with the Greens, the Metal Masters, the Production Masters, etc., 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 etc. And he was asked, "Are you going to do a Kickstarter then?" To which his answer was, "No, why would I? Don't need the money." And apparently this generated a very puzzled response among some punters, who I think obviously were of the opinion that Kickstarters were there to get them lots of free figures for next to nothing. And I mean, there is a degree to which you can hold Mantic or Reaper responsible for that attitude, in that the way they plan Kickstarters with stretch goals for the bigger Kickstarters does lead to this expectation that you will get lots of shiny stuff, and it will cost you less than getting it any other way, and let's have a feeding frenzy on the Kickstarter. But people need to stop thinking that A, Kickstarters are in any way a right, and B, that they will get that kind of level of offer out of someone who is a one-man operation looking for $2,000 to actually be able to afford to produce a range of figures he really loves. End rant.
And we're back. Sorry, Mike.
I think you summed that up perfectly, Mike.
I did it all without mentioning The Walking Dead because I thought I'd leave Neil time for a rant.
Okay, one thing I found very interesting with the Walking Dead Kickstarter, which launched a couple of days before we recorded this show, and I think they raised something crazy like 210,000 in their first day.
Looking at it now, as I seem to recall is my job on this podcast, $50,000 goal, $222,202 pledge. Come on, somebody, pledge $20 just for prettiness' sake.
And that's only been running for...
That's got 4 days to go and has nearly 2,000 backers, and they're already complaining.
Sorry, 4 days.
4 days gone.
4 days gone.
4 days gone. Yeah.
And it has nearly 2,000 backers, some of whom are already complaining.
Actually, the complaint started right at the start.
Yeah.
Within the first 300 comments, and this is because all that happened was I happened to notice on. You heard on the last show I was kind of sigh. They're launching on Kickstarter, and I happened to notice on Twitter that it had launched because I wasn't taking a lot of notice. And I thought I'd just have a wander over. And see how it was doing, and it was doing marvellously well. If they hit $100,000 incredibly quickly. But within the first 300 comments, there were already several people having a discussion about the value of what they were pledging for, saying, I don't believe that what we are currently pledging for is worth what we're pledging. However, hang on. However, I believe that by the end of the Kickstarter, it will be.
What you saw on the first day was the 1,000 early bird specials go.
Yes.
And very little else.
Yes. Now, interestingly on that, now again, early bird specials, they'll be giving away for $10 less than the other pledge. I'm sorry, big deal. And I know that's what an awful lot of people do on early birds. Now, the thing that, and again, this boils down to, this ties in with a lot of what Mike has just said. And it's something that somebody like Mantic have done very, very well. They appear to give lots of stuff away. Do not believe it for a second. Lots of people appear to have this myth that, they're giving loads of stuff away.
I will say something I said, I think, during the it was either the Dead Zone or the Dreadball or the Kings of War Kickstarter, to the effect of, if you think that Mantic acting all surprised at making a stretch goal is a genuine reaction, then you are a mug.
Indeed. These are very carefully planned, and I would suggest that all the stretch goals that you're currently hitting, all these stretch free figures that you are currently hitting, and will be for some time in Walking Dead, is everything that they planned to be in the box game right from the start.
The only point I would make, I make two actually. One is that I think the first of the Mantic Kickstarters, they may well have been genuinely surprised at the level of support they got.
Yes.
And secondly, don't blame Mantic. It's a very good way of doing business, and they have figured it out. It is not their fault. It is your fault if you expect somebody of the likes of Baker Miniatures or somebody of that small level to be giving you the same level of rewards as Mantic, because they're not, because that's not what their Kickstarter is for. And to quote William Shatner, get a life.
Oh, this really has got you on the wrong way, hasn't it, Mike?
The two things that bug me are people who have a go at Mantic for abusing Kickstarters, because I don't think that's fair. They've figured out a brilliant business model that works with Kickstarters, and more bloody power to them. And the other thing that bugs me is people who think that every Kickstarter should be run the way Mantic run theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I think is a problem with some Kickstarters? And I will cite Mantic in this. But again, it's Mantic's business plan. Mantic's business plan obviously is to use Kickstarter to get as much money in as possible to produce the product. But you never see it for sale in retail places afterwards. It just dies a death, and that's probably because everyone's bought it on Kickstarter.
Yeah, it does really rain on the parade of people who are trying to sell Mantic stuff.
Interesting having that when we had that conversation with Ruben. Who is, Mike, remind me.
He's our club secretary, and he's also PE2 Collectibles.
Indeed. And the comment that he made about the fact of traders now steering away from companies that run Kickstarters, that big Kickstarters, simply because everybody's bought it on Kickstarter.
What,
Yeah, and-
for example, just appeared on the Mantic Madness Facebook group, Troll Trader, the bloke in Cornwall who actually does his trade via eBay and is a thoroughly nice chap.
And he's brilliant. I use him all the time. He's absolutely fantastic.
He's currently selling off Warpath Enforcer packs for £5.99.
Yeah, and this is the problem, is that I don't think there's any longevity in any of Mantic's games, unfortunately, because they don't support them going on, because they want to get that big burst in, do the Kickstarter.
Possibly beg to differ with Kings of War. They seem to have just hit a gold mine, and I think that might be mostly thanks to Games Workshop.
Yeah, that might be the one, but the rest of them, it's almost like, this is everything you're going to get. We might do another Kickstarter in the future for the next season or something. But it's
Dreadball seems to be doing all right. It's got a thriving tournament scene.
Yeah, but Dreadball is now effectively a complete game. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing at all.
No. But at the same time, I do hear what you're saying, Mike. I really do, yeah.
What I'm trying to say is, if the games are not available in stores to buy, then I think they'll just burn and go.
Yeah, they will naturally die a death, because actually, and again, this boils down to who's going to buy them, and then they all start appearing secondhand on eBay, which of course seems to be another thing that is a product of Kickstarter. And especially you find this a lot in board games, that you get a lot of guys who back and get 2 copies, one to keep and one to flog on eBay, or one to keep and several to flog on eBay.
Where is the best place to get Sales of Glory?
On eBay. Yeah.
eBay. Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's a tricky one. There's very good things about Kickstarters. They do, they can do a lot of good.
Yeah.
But they can also do a lot of bad.
Interestingly, I think this is right. I might have to check the figures, but actually, last year did not tabletop gaming. So that's miniatures games, board games, RPGs, because as far as Kickstarter is concerned, that's under the same label. Did that not, for the first time ever, actually overtake computer gaming on Kickstarter as the most successful area of backing on Kickstarter last year? That's interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
Now, a couple of interesting points. We have spoken in the past to Westwind on a couple of occasions. And certainly when we've spoken to Andy and Wendy before, they have turned around and they have changed or they certainly changed some of their production and the way they do stuff in order to do stuff on Kickstarter. And we showed that with both Empire of the Dead and War and Empire. So they actually changed their business model. But again, that was like a proper Kickstarter in the fact of they turned around and went, we're going to produce this and run this in order to fund, so that we can do the entire range and fund it all and produce it all. So some would argue that that's a proper use of Kickstarter, but they did actually change their business model in order to use Kickstarter. And then let's talk about someone who's done it really well and someone who's done it not so well. One excellent example of using Kickstarter, and at this point I would cite this probably above all others that I've seen.
Bet I know who you're going to say.
Yeah, okay. Right, now, going from the... okay, I just mentioned Westwind, and Westwind have done one of the best... I mean, their Empire that did Kickstarter, I know they had some issues with late delivery or what have you. That is a problem with that everybody gets, I think a lot of people get, with scale creep. And this is where I'm coming on the next thing I'm going to mention. Because a lot of companies end up in situations where they have scale creep or scope creep, which is fairly common in projects. Unless you're very good at project management, as soon as you start getting extra stuff in than what you expect, you're going to get scope creep in some way, shape or form. And I think all of us talking have done some form of project management at some point in our day job and know exactly where all this comes in. Because, funnily enough, it tends to be a bit of a feature of IT, and since we all work in IT, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
So we
Sorry,
are quite.
boss.
Yeah, we are familiar with the way that goes, and that is something that you see an awful lot of. And with some companies, it gets massively out of hand. Okay, company I'm going to cite, and let's see if I'm right. PSC Games, Plastic Soldier Company.
Yep.
Great War. Okay.
Absolutely. You pledged it turned up. End of problem.
They turned around and said, we are doing a Kickstarter to produce this game. This is what we are going to do. Okay? There was so many comments hitting the entirety of that Kickstarter saying, the Kickstarter's going really well. Why aren't you now funding for Expansion 1, Expansion 2, Expansion 3? Why aren't you doing that? Why can't we now pledge for the French? Why do we have to wait till next year for a tank expansion? You mentioned that you're going to do a tank expansion. Why can't we do it on this Kickstarter now? And Will turned around and said, no, this Kickstarter is to produce this game. Okay, they were offering a few rewards, a few extra bits and pieces. But he was very, very clear about the scope of the project, what you were buying, and how far he was willing to go. And actually, I think to a certain extent, possibly that put some people off.
All I can say to that is tough.
However, he delivered a week early.
And when did you last see a Kickstarter do that?
It was meant to be delivered in, I think it was July last year. Or the start of July was the date. They actually delivered it in time for the UK Games Expo. It was a week early. But that was basically because he turned around and went, this is the scope of the Kickstarter, this is what we're doing, and he did it.
See that, folks? That's called project management.
Yeah, I've got to give it to him.
Respect to him for that. That was very sensible. And also, given please, if you are listening and thinking I'm picking on Mantic, I'm not. They're just a very good example. Those people who expected him to run a Mantic-style Kickstarter, it was never meant to be that. He gets an awful lot of kudos for sticking to his guns.
Indeed. But he stuck to his guns and delivered. And, that for me, it was just a stunning piece of business. Because he knew exactly what he wanted to do and wasn't willing to be wavered and taken away on the Kickstarter wave that you actually see some companies do.
And if you went to a bank for a loan for that amount, they'd make you produce a business plan.
Yeah. And talking about waves being carried away, and I think we have to address one of the current elephants in the room as the last bit of this conversation and probably wrapping this whole roundtable up. And that is unfortunately something that one of us got on the back end of, didn't they, Mr. Hobbs?
Yeah. Yeah, good old Alien Dungeon and all Martian funds.
Yeah,
poor guys. We do appear to be beating up on them over the course of several episodes here.
Now, look, okay, now the thing is, this will probably be the last time that we mention it, simply because since our last letters, where we did mention them in the last news, they officially published that the company has gone into receivership. The company has gone bankrupt. That was officially posted on their Kickstarter page. I think it was the 27th of January. Yeah. Now, it was something that, because some of us are closer to the industry, it was something that has been suspected was going on for the best part of 3 months because of simple things that were happening with the company and with other things. And then they had that spectacular failure.
Let's face it, if you have a grasp of company finance above and beyond the corner shop economics level, it should have been obvious to anybody.
Yeah. Now, on the face of it, you look at their Kickstarter, and it was a spectacular success. They raised over $300,000.
Unfortunately, it cost them $400,000 to produce everything.
Especially when they were doing worldwide shipping for free? Or at one cost?
There's one cost.
One cost. So basically they ended up in a situation where they were selling stuff at just over the cost to produce them, and by the time they shipped it, they were making a loss. Is that right?
Yeah, they burned through their postal budget on the first wave. I mean, it probably didn't help them that the postal rate went up massively in that sort of year.
Mm.
But yeah, they gave away so much and
got their sums wrong.
They got the sums wrong, and unfortunately,
if they ever had any sums in the first place.
Well, I mean, these guys have been in business for a long time. Alien Dungeon and Architects of War, they're the same company. Major US distributor for war games. They've been around for donkey's years.
Yeah, long time.
But they just got carried away. And it's really sad. I mean, okay, there's a lot of people on the Kickstarter saying that they've been lied to, and people who saw them at conventions, they're basically saying that the guys there basically lied to their faces when they said everything's going to be fine. And the fact that they were taking orders right up until the last second, which is...
And who else have we seen do that?
Yeah.
But maybe they panicked. Maybe they just thought they could get out of it. If they got a bit of money in, they could keep the company going for a little bit longer, keep it going for a bit longer, and then it just folds. And, now people are probably losing their houses, and they've lost, they lost their jobs, they're losing their houses.
But I will bet you, by contrast, if you were to look at something like a Reaper Bones Kickstarter, with all its stretch goals, there is slack built into that plan that will cope with such things as somebody bugging up the postage rates.
Well, what we're seeing now in a lot of Kickstarters is they don't put postage on the Kickstarter. They wait and put postage on the Pledge Manager.
Yep.
Which is the most sensible way of doing it.
By far and away the most sensible approach.
Yeah. It is a sobering story in what several people see as the runaway success of Kickstarter. This isn't the first time we've seen a successful Kickstarter crash, burn, and fail to deliver. We had another one, didn't we? One that was featured on the show. We saw it with Torn Armour. Remember back in show episode 104, everything was going massively. Then they got involved with a miniature manufacturer who didn't deliver. Which is a whole entirely different.
And takes us in fact back to other companies we have discussed in the past few hours.
Indeed, yes. However, so something like Torn Armour, for example, did massively well, ended up failing to deliver. There are several examples in board games. I think one of the ones that immediately springs to mind was the remake of Glory to Rome, where I think the guy actually lost his house because basically due to production costs and production issues, he ended up losing far more money than what he'd actually made on the Kickstarter. So it is a sobering thought in all this discussion that, Kickstarters, whilst some have done incredibly well, they are not the cure-all. And they
are not a get-rich-quick scheme, either for you or the backer or the person running the project.
Indeed. And I think anybody who does Kickstarter and who produces a Kickstarter has to go in with their eyes very much open. Because I think for the unwary, there are an awful lot of pitfalls. Obviously, for companies, it works really well. And there is something about Kickstarters. At the moment, they are particularly in vogue, and whilst there is an undercurrent of anti-Kickstarterism, for want of a better phrase, of course, there isn't an undercurrent of people who do not like Kickstarters. Having said that, there is no doubt about the fact that there is a particular Kickstarter appeal and a particular something about Kickstarters that appeals to people. And, I mean, I've been, even in the last couple of weeks, blogging about various things. Funny enough, on this very show, we've been chatting with Byron about Polyversal. There is something about it and the hobby that appeals to people.
It'll be quite interesting in our next show, looking ahead, because we're going to be chatting to Carl from Open Combat about what he's been up to in the last year since he did his Kickstarter.
Mm.
Oh yeah,
and that has been a bit of a rocky road for him.
Yeah, and he made a small amount. He only wanted to get his book in production, so it'd be great to chat to him about that. And also we've got Chris from Modifius coming on, and obviously they did the Kickstarter on Thunderbirds, didn't they?
They did. Modiphi has used Kickstarter a lot these days, and they do a lot of different products. Yeah, they do an awful lot of RPGs. Yeah, they did Thunderbirds, which again was a tremendously, at least as far as the Kickstarter was concerned, was a tremendously successful project.
Yeah,
it will be interesting chatting to him to see, exactly how it's going and what his opinions of it are.
Indeed.
I think we've done this to death, don't you?
I think so.
Well, put it this way, I think we could talk an awful lot more, but we have talked longer than we said we would.
Hands up, who's surprised? Not seeing any hands out there, are you?
No, I think as soon as you said, and finally we'll do Kickstarter, and then thinking we were going to do it in 10 minutes. Yeah.
Well, I've done in 5. Everybody said I'd summed it up perfectly, and then you went on for another 35 minutes.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. And now it's time to close the mailbag.
I think it is.
We'll bring the roundtable to a close, and obviously because we've been discussing a lot of your questions, we'll bring our mailbag back in episode 166.
Well, I may have calmed down a bit.
Possibly.
I think that about wraps it up for another show. What do you think, guys? That was all right, wasn't it?
Well, it's not a bad show. I think we can, we can always work on things, make things better. There's no point resting on our laurels.
Yes.
Push on, at speed.
Indeed.
I got to rant!
Oh, you call that a rant? I had one all planned, but we didn't have time for it.
Oh, I've got several thoughts like that.
I must admit, yeah, we didn't mention that at all, did we?
No.
And yes. Shall we trial this for next time round? Prodos games.
Ooh.
Yes. Interestingly, I mean, as I say, the conversation we've had on today's show, which, culminated in just chatting about, it got culminated in Mike's rants and discussions thereof. Actually led me to do a few bits and pieces of more investigation for an article on, my next article for Miniature Wargames, and from the rant and everything else, yes, I think we have basically missed Prodos games off the love.
Or lack thereof. So, yes, at some point, maybe. Yeah, it's not a good situation. When I found it, it's not impressive at all. But talking of Kickstarters, did you see the news that came out the weekend? Conan's going to be delayed for 3 months.
Yeah. Chinese New Year. It'll be worth waiting for.
We did all pledge this, didn't we?
Yeah. We did all pledge this.
Oh God!
Yeah, actually, quite interestingly, I'm kind of wondering if I now go back to them and say, when I completed that pledge, I didn't pledge for all the Kickstarter. I didn't pledge for all the Kickstarter exclusives. Can I update my pledge manager and pledge for those things that I missed because I can now afford them? What do you reckon?
You had one chance.
You snooze, you lose.
I wouldn't be surprised if they reopen the pledge manager a bit closer to Wave 1 going out.
Me either.
I think I might drop a line because there was just a couple of things I missed, and it was just one of the at the time I just couldn't quite stretch through it, and it was like now all of a sudden they're turning around and going, oh no, it's now going to be another 6 months before we get it.
Yeah, I mean Mantic did that for Dungeon Saga, which I was very, very pleased with. They partly did it for the reprint of the Adventurer's Companion without the errata, but they also managed to squeeze in another of the really nice book boxes for those of us who have more stuff than will fit in the 2 that came with the Box B pledge.
Oh, cool. Yes, so hopefully at least I'll be able to get all the Kickstarter exclusives. So, but as I say, the fact that it's now going to be June, bit of a shame. But as you say, hopefully, and especially looking at some of the artwork for the boards and stuff that they put out today, they look very nice.
That's all right. It means you can play Dungeon Circle while you're waiting.
I shall have to come over to your place to do that, won't I?
Yeah, but you were going to anyway, weren't you?
I certainly had a plan. Let me know, as I say, let me know when you start a Dungeon Saga campaign.
Will do.
I'll be up for that.
So whilst you two are chatting, shall we bring it into land?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? Hopefully, this is, well, as I say, this is a little bit shorter than the last one, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. I thank you to Byron for chatting to us, and thank you to everybody for your questions. Many apologies that we didn't do a proper mailbag, but as you can appreciate, we answered a whole lot of questions. So please keep your mailbag questions coming in. The stuff that we had for this episode is, we will come to next time round. So 2 weeks, and we shall be coming back to your questions. We haven't lost them. We do have them all on file because Mr. Hobbs is that organised.
He is.
Indeed.
I am.
Indeed. So, once again, I would just like to say thank you very much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and it's helped you on your painting projects.
Hasn't helped me on mine.
If you're listening, Dave, get that bloody glider done.
Please.
Your broken man is Neil. He needs that glider.
And so that's it for another show. And though it pains me, I suppose the last thing I have to say is well done to the Broncos.
I could have had that. Betfair were offering 7-1 on what was a 2-horse race, and I said Broncos are going to win this, and I should have actually put some money on it.
I got no idea what you're talking about.
It was so many people saying it wasn't a great. I thought it was a great game.
I thought it was an excellent game.
But having said that, I'm a defense coach, so
So why wouldn't you like it? And I'm a Vikings fan, so why wouldn't I like a good defensive slugfest?
Indeed, yes. So yes, well done to the Vikings. Yes, so hopefully Peyton gets his fairy tale ending and does the sensible thing and rides off into the sunset.
What's the betting he's quarterbacking for the LA Rams next year?
Oh, please don't. Please don't.
I've still got no idea what you're talking about.
On that note, I think we need to wrap this up. So, thank you for listening. Take care, happy gaming, and we shall speak to you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Cheerio.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media, and here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.